This is actually also open to subscribers just because it's very late. I think some folks in America are already sleeping. Stephanie, what time is it by you? So this is going to be episode 4, and Sarah, what time is it by you as well? This is going to be kind of part 2, what I meant to do in the walkthrough. We went through so many of those details from Suzanne Morphew's notes that it kind of, got sort of slowed down the whole thing. So we're going to try and speed up in this particular walkthrough. I'm not going to spend too much time on sort of waffling around. I'll quickly introduce you guys to just a little anecdote, half of it, and then I'll put the other side to it at the end of the walkthrough. Timmy, come. I don't know if Timmy wants to go outside, but right now it's 5 o'clock in the morning where I am. I know it's, I think, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, but I guess it's a little bit later in other parts of America. Is it around about midnight in Connecticut, Stephanie? Yvonne Phillips, good to have you here. Rococo. By the way, just before I went live, have you guys ever seen this? Have you ever seen a cat licking a dog? Like, almost like cleaning its own offspring, but instead it's licking a dog. The only time I've ever seen that is with this dog and the cat. Pretty weird. Oh, Sarah says it's 7 minutes past 9 in Alabama. Okay, so that's not too late. 8 p.m. in Arizona. Okay, not too bad. Oh, 10 p.m., so it's not too bad. Okay, well, it's 5 o'clock in the morning here. The sun should be up in about an hour. My side of the world, I guess it's gone down a long time ago on your side. Jackie says 9 o'clock in the Midwest, 8 o'clock in Phoenix. Oh, really? So Nisi says her cat and dog also do that. Okay, so my animals aren't that special. Grooming, yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so Stephanie wanted to know why my bike ride was so epic. I'm just going to talk about that for 5 minutes, and then we're going to jump right in. I just want to give people a chance to come in. Maybe we'll get to maybe 100 people kind of in chat, and then we can kind of get started. As a Jensen, when they're happy, they will groom each other. They are happy. That's a nice way of putting it. Pamela Stevens, 7 minutes past 2 in Melbourne. Jackie Blue from the Midwest. Okay, so on Sunday, it was kind of a big deal for me. Although I'd done this before, I was joining a group of guys training for the Ironman. The Ironman is in a month, so it's basically early April. So March is sort of their last month to really train for it. A lot of them are super fit. They've been at it for quite a long time. In a weird way, I guess I inspired one of the guys to do the Ironman. I would come to gym with like a shirt on, half Ironman or whatever, and that got him interested. So anyway, he's really caught up in it, but the Ironman got delayed a couple of times because of coronavirus. But anyway, the point is, I was now going to join this group. I suppose you could call them an elite group, but they're just really fit. And it was just like, well, I'm not that fit, and it's kind of going to be pretty hardcore, right? And so I had actually joined them 2 weeks earlier, and they just it was a little bit difficult because the route that we went on starts off with a really long, steady climb. And so I immediately just fell off the pace, and it just was pretty embarrassing. So I was kind of like, okay, I don't want that to happen again. And so this workout was to do the same thing again, but better. And so it was like, okay, now you've got to do that same climb again and not fall off, can you? And so I'm only going to tell you half the story. I'll tell you the other half at the end of this episode. So the other half was, sorry, the first half is I have bought a new bicycle frame, not recently, but I've sort of had it. And the reason why I was using this tech and the special rims was just to give me a bit of an advantage so that I'm riding a light bike, light rims. It's kind of a time trial bike. And the idea is just so that I can keep up with these other guys. And, but anyway, the problem was because my tire burst, I've actually got it here, because this tire burst, I replaced it, and I just kind of assumed that they would replace it with a similar sort of tire, but they actually put on a slightly bigger, fatter tire. Because of that, this bigger, fatter tire, so now we all meeting, the sun still hasn't come up, we're all meeting, we're about to leave, I'm on time, and it's now, no, we're going to do this thing. And I sort of just had this thing playing in my mind. Is your wheel not going to rub against the side of the frame? Because it's the kind of frame where it's the wheel actually, where the wheel goes into the frame creates like a parallel curve. It's very, very aerodynamic. But because it's so aerodynamic and it's because it's so tight, it's quite a tight fit getting the wheel right in. And because I'd put in a bigger tire, it actually did exactly what I feared. It caused the wheel to rub against the frame and also rub against the brake pads. And so anyway, so ultimately I noticed this was happening. I mean, I'd obviously tested it out before. I inserted the wheel, it spun round, there was no resistance. But when I drove there and I unloaded my bike, suddenly it was now jammed. I don't know whether the wind moved it or what, but so there I am, there are about 8 cyclists gathered in the parking lot and my wheel's jammed. I know it's jammed and I'm trying to unjam it. And I don't know, it's dark. I can't really figure it out. And ultimately I just said, look, I can't ride, and so a guy did come over to try and help me. And I just said, look, this is not going to work. And then I thought, well, if I rush, maybe I can hurry home, take both wheels off, put them on another frame and then join the guys, right? And so, but that's really the beginning of the epic. So it started in the worst possible way, which was, I mean, like I said, I wanted to ride with him on this first climb, and then that would be job done, tick of the box kind of thing. And here I was, okay, off they went. I deloaded my bike back on, rushed home and did the whole mechanical thing and so on. And I'll tell you guys about the rest of that story, because there is the rest of that story after this. Okay, so we got about 60 people in chat. Let's just see who's here. Please pass the peppers here. Good to see you. Glovana is here. Hello. Sarah says she's born and raised in Liverpool. Have you still got your Liverpudlian accent? I see we've got quite a few members in chat, even though this is also open to subscribers. Dorothy Wheatley from Colorado. You would think that there would be folks from Colorado paying attention to the Barry Morphew case. I suppose some people are also paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine, and I am thinking about covering that. Like, I'm already covering it on Patreon. It feels like it's quite important. It's not like, you might say it's irrelevant to true crime. I think it's absolutely relevant to us. The question is, can you provide analysis on that's worthwhile? So just before I came onto this, I wrote analysis on Putin based on the biggest foreign investor in Russia. And it's just fascinating. I mean, I'm learning so much just by, you watch the news, but then you also go and research stuff, and you collating all that information is pretty interesting. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Sunflowers, hi from California. Would be nice. Gulf Shores, Alabama here. Sageti Norna, it's good to have you here as well. It's actually quite nice having it on the subscribers thing, just because there are a lot of you that we know and love, and we haven't spoken in a while, I guess. Zircon says, seems Suzanne isn't getting as much coverage. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know whether it's people are afraid of the legal side of things. They're afraid to say things. I don't know whether it's just not a very sexy case. I don't know if that's the issue. To me, I think the Morphew case is challenging because of the quote-unquote lack of evidence. I don't really think there is this huge lack of evidence. The evidence isn't, there's not like a lot of very, very strong evidence, but there's a huge amount of evidence. So to me, the legal aspect to it is really interesting. And I think the fact that you've got these two really excellent elite defense lawyers means the prosecution have their work cut out for them. Sarah says your accent is still there. I moved to Alabama when I was 18. Do people say to you, where are you from? Like, even though you're American, do they sort of say where are you from, or not really? So I knew a swimmer. He actually went to the Olympics. He actually went out with Amanda Beard, who's an American. I'm sure you guys know her. And he was in America not for very long, but then he came back, and then he just kept the American accent. And some people thought, like people speaking with an American accent. We even have ads in South Africa where it's with an American accent. It's like, oh, that's much better than local kind of thing. Just shows you how much people love America and admire America and all that. But anyway, so this guy just spent not that long in America, but then he came back with this full-on American accent, and then he's kind of maintained it. And some people think it's a bit artificial. It's like this South African speaking with an American accent, and he was only there for, not a particularly long time. And so some people think it's a bit pretentious, and other people think it's awesome. Okay, 65 people in chat. I think we need to get going. We had about 15 minutes. Pamela says, I know with myself and others I had some really colorful arguments with my partner, but as Suzanne said, she was scared to be alone. That is often a big red flag. You get, I think that was also in the Oscar Pistorius case, where she actually texted or SMS'd or messaged Oscar and said to him directly, I feel afraid to be alone with you sometimes. That is often a red flag. I think that fear is based on something. It's not like, where does that fear come from? It's based on actual experience. Azza Jensen says, one of the most interesting YouTube videos out there. Thanks a lot. Okay. Thanks from Vancouver, Canada. Okay. Yeah, a bit phony, that accent thing. Thanks. Yeah, Stephanie also says thank you. Oh, I see Terry Dean's also here. Yvonne says, my hubby wants to take, I think you mean, wants to take you to Telluride, Colorado for our 25th wedding anniversary in September. Should I go? I think you should go. you can take in the true crime sights and sounds kind of thing, and then also have a romantic time as well. Is your husband interested at all in true crime? Do you ever like have conversations about it? Nisi says telling them they scare you could only make it worse. I think it's quite a good point. Should you communicate that or not? I think it depends. I think if you have a good partner, inherently good partner, and you say something like "you're scaring me" or whatever, then it might actually be like a wake up call. Like, wow, sure, I didn't actually realize that's going on. Um, uh, I've kind of been in a situation where, in fact, it happened just the other day where South Africa is quite an unsafe country in general, but I was walking along like a alley, not really a dark alley because the one side was completely open to kind of a highway, so it wasn't like it was this really secret, dark, enclosed space, but there was no one in that sort of area. And I was walking down this road, and a woman was approaching, and then the next thing I noticed, she was walking on the other side of this road, and then I realized, oh, she was possibly worried that I could do something. And so all I'm trying to say is sometimes communicating while I'm actually afraid can actually help you to see, well, this person isn't a threat, kind of thing. But you are right. If someone does have these things, they may realize, okay, you're actually onto me. You should be afraid, kind of thing. Brianna says Barry's wife goes missing. He gets a new woman in a matter of weeks. The affidavit does mention that I think he was with someone on Valentine's Day. Well, I must say this background is so not really very happy with it. I really need to get a bigger thing behind me. It's really upsetting my OCD. I don't know how you guys feel. I think I maybe need to have it just half on the one side. Fear, Nisi says fear would likely be a deal breaker unless he could prove to change considerably and consistently. Terry Dean says Telluride is gorgeous but expensive. Meeser Mom, hi everyone. Madeline Jimenez is here. Hi, good to see you. Dorothy says Barry Morphew is walking free in Salida. I lived in Salida for 35 years, but left in 2000. Did you enjoy it? And is Salida is it a inclusive community? Are the people there? Do they reach out to the rest of the world, or are they kind of insular? That's really the word I'm looking for. Maui Swift says apparently he's working too. Okay, so we were at 100, now we're back down to 93. Trisha Wood, I believe Barry's line of credit. So just a point I want to make to the mods. How many mods are in here? I think Stephanie's here. I'm not sure if Jean has joined us yet. I think she said she was going to. But just a word to Stephanie, I guess, is bear in mind, I think we all know what we know and what we think, but this is a case that is sub judice, it's still being heard, and so I've got to kind of put that disclaimer. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. Please don't make comments that Barry is definitely this or whatever. What we're trying to do here is look at the evidence and examine the evidence and do that side of it. So in other words, we want to almost see the affidavit through the prosecution's eyes and to some extent the defense eyes and see what the defense would do or could do. We don't really want to prognosticate too much or jump the gun, because that is for the courts to decide. So as I say, please don't be kind of judging Barry Morphew and saying certain things. If you do, unfortunately, Stephanie's going to have to either mute you or kick you off. There's also a legal dimension to that. You can actually get yourself into a lot of trouble for doing that. So we all know what things are looking like, but you can only say a certain amount given the sensitive nature of the legal narrative right now. Does that make sense? Misa Mom says Stephanie, question mark. Stephanie is the mod that is on the chat here. You must be new, Misa Mom, because Stephanie is a pretty well-known true crime rocket scientist. She was actually on with me on the previous live when we dealt with Van Gogh. That was really a good thing. Okay, so I want to get going. Trisha Wood says, why do you think the FBI didn't take hold of the Holiday Inn room he stayed in and get DNA? It's possible that a couple of things happened. One is that it's like they are thinking that Suzanne is in the Salida area. So in other words, they would have, and I mean, it would be reasonable to think Suzanne should be somewhere near her mountain bike or her home or all of that. Does that make sense? So you're going to be looking for Suzanne in Salida, in that area, in the woods, right? And I think that's just part of the point, is that you get everyone focused there if it's a misdirection, and then you go and do something somewhere else, and no one's really going to look at that because they don't know that is part of the crime scene. So I would say that the reason they didn't do that was it took them a while to realize, okay, things aren't what they seem. This isn't this person isn't just missing. There's foul play. It's also beyond, like, it's not like, okay, so there's foul play, someone abducted her from where she fell off her bike or whatever. That's actually not what it seems. She never went for a bike ride. Then you've got to start to figure out, okay, so what is actually going on here? And Barry's, I think the first thing we heard was that Barry said he went to like a volunteer firefighter training in Denver. That is what I understood, what I heard. And then it only came out later that no, he had a big job in Broomfield. And so it's taking the authorities a while to catch up to the authentic narrative, and that is why it takes them a while to do that. And I think the other side is they would not necessarily think of Barry immediately as a suspect because it seems like he's got an alibi. It seems like he was far away, right? It's kind of like the Scott Peterson alibi. I was out fishing. I was in San Francisco Bay. You know, I don't know where. I was way away when all of this happened, right? And so that's kind of the scenario. And then you realize, okay, so the crime. Where is the crime scene? It's kind of also the pertinent point and the pertinent question in Van Gogh is, where is the crime scene, right? Where did Van Gogh actually die? Where was he shot? And that's a really important question to ask, and it's one people often lose track of. Two of the most important questions in true crime are where and when. You might think they are really straightforward, but when can be very difficult, especially when you don't have a body. When did this person die? When did this incident take place? When is so important, because when you know when, then you can look at an alibi. Does someone have an alibi or not? If you don't know when, then whether you've got an alibi or not becomes difficult to assert or establish. The when is quite a big issue in the Amanda Knox case. You've got this quite long timeline where it's difficult to bring it down to a particular point. John Benet Ramsey as well, Madeleine McCann as well. So some of the most high-profile cases, the reason they're unsolved or difficult is because when is a question mark. Also, to some extent, where is a question mark. If you don't know where the crime scene is, think about the John Benet Ramsey case. You really know exactly where things happened. In the Madeleine McCann case, you really know exactly where something happened. In the Amanda Knox case, it's a little bit different. But you guys get where I'm coming from. Pastor Pepper says, seriously, Gypsy, what's in that water? I don't think it's that. Like people have often said, is it Colorado's height above sea level? Is it the water? I think it is the fact that a lot of these crimes are from people who are not from Colorado that move to Colorado, and in their mind they've got this idea of a fairy tale. That fairy tale is what you're saying is what's in the water. That fairy tale is something in the mind like, well, I've come here to have a happily ever after and things aren't working out. Now I'm getting really upset. Now I've got to fight for my fairy tale, right? And it's often the fairy tale that actually creates horrible things. If you sort of lower your standards for the fairy tale, the nightmare opposite becomes diffused. And we see this over and over again in true crime. Brianna says, I've been on a John Bonet kick recently. I can't get enough. Still believe it's an inside job. Okay. Trisha Wood, great theory. Okay, so I think let's get going. We've got 125 people on now, so let's get going. We were about to start with the LinkedIn data and stats and all sorts of information from page 17 of 129. I actually was under the impression I hadn't even reached 10% through this narrative, but I see I'm a little bit above that, but still there's quite a long way to go. So we're on page 17. I'm going to sort of try and deal with the narrative and then I'll kind of come back to you guys. I'll try and balance both, but I really want to kind of progress here. I didn't really think there'd be so many people on at this time, but anyway. So it starts off the top of page 17, LinkedIn. So it says your affiants served search warrants for LinkedIn and WhatsApp and received records for Suzanne's LinkedIn account with photos and text shared between her and Libla. So the LinkedIn is a little bit like the secret calculator with Chris Watts and Chris Watts. You kind of have this alternative social media platform that not everyone would, or this alternative playground, this app basically where you're going to do your communicating, but that someone else may not anticipate. So it says here, your affiant also served warrants on the Verizon account for Libla, that's Jeff Libla, the paramour of Suzanne Morphew. The following data was collected. Number one, from LinkedIn, Libla and Suzanne sent 59 communications to each other. Now, what do you think that is going to be? 59 communications in total, 59 communications in a particular year, 59 communications in a particular month. What do you think that is? Thanks, Misa Mom. Terry Dean says, I moved to Alaska for that fairy tale, which it was not. Sometimes you must just, it's nice believing in fairy tales, but sometimes if you're just realistic, like my bicycle ride, which I'll talk to you guys about later, it makes life a lot easier. Having that fairy tale can actually often then not be a fairy tale. The fairy tale is the problem. Vicky says 59 in a month. Terry Wood says days. Carol says a month. Please, Pastor Pepper says text. That would easily be a week or a month. Yvonne says 59 communications in a short period of time. Okay, that's a bit vague, but I'm not sure what you mean by that. Is it days, weeks? Zircon says it's a few months, isn't it? Well, the answer is all of those were in one day. 59 communications in one day. And that day was Saturday, May 9th, right? Yeah, so that should be quite shocking to you, because that is giving an idea that things are coming to a denouement. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but that is the way I pronounce it. So these 59 messages are showing you that there is certainly an escalation from Suzanne's side in how she's feeling, in how emotional she is, in what is going on. Bear in mind, just 3 days earlier, she told Barry, I'm done, right? So, yeah, you've got these 59 communications, and also the Chris Watts phone data review, you also see some days there's sort of a tide and flow of messages, and then sometimes there's this intense barrage of exchanges. And so this is kind of like that. And then the question is Barry acting a certain way that is causing these communications, or is Barry almost like peripheral, but then realizes, wow, she's paying a lot of attention to her phone. She's done with me, and I can see why. Look how much she is typing and whatever. I mean, in order to send 59 messages in a day, it means you've got to be pretty busy, pretty preoccupied, right? So one does wonder how that dynamic was actually playing out. Hi, Carol Johansson. So 59 communications on Saturday, May 9th, that's the day that she died. A lot of people think she died on Mother's Day. I think she was killed in the late afternoon, about 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So on this particular day. The last outgoing message was at 11 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. So you must know it's not 59 messages sent in the whole day. It was 59 messages sent in a morning. And her last message was, I'm on WA for WhatsApp, I think. Which suggests that there was then even more messaging. We also know that she sent a photo of herself to Jeff Libler, and one wonders whether that wasn't intercepted. Let's just have a look. Welcome to Gathering Place. Welcome, Gathering Place, to this Gathering Place. Carol says, I agree, Saturday evening. What time was the last picture taken? I used to know that. I don't actually have it in front of me, but I think it was, does anyone know? I want to say 1 o'clock, or somewhere around there. Midday, sort of noon. Let's just have a look. I don't really have the full affidavit in front of me. I've just got an excerpt. I suppose I can find out for you guys. Kathy says 2:30-ish. Please pass the paper says 2:03. So yeah, that is around about 2 p.m. So at the time that she sends this, this is the last message, 2:11 p.m. That is about 8 minutes after the selfie. So she sends the selfie, I guess, on WhatsApp. Because I don't know if she would have sent a photo of herself on LinkedIn, but anyway. And then she says, I'm on WhatsApp. And then Libler sent a response at 2:39 p.m., 2:46 p.m., and 2:47 p.m. that Suzanne didn't answer. Now, that already suggests the possibility that she's already in trouble, because it doesn't really make sense why she would make herself available, not only in terms of, yes, a selfie of me, but also let's talk on WhatsApp, and we've sent all these messages to one another, but then suddenly the communication just stops. Does that make sense? So you have this intense communication and then nothing. That doesn't really make sense. I don't know if she looks scared in that last photo. I don't really think so. I think Barry described her as being inebriated. I don't think that's the case as well. Kathy says she was already gone by 3. So, it could be that early. It could have taken place kind of, I don't want to say in broad daylight, but certainly not at night. It's not a Chris Watts scenario. It's not a in the dark scenario, although there is the darkness of between between the incident and the next morning leaving in the car. Now you've got to be careful. You might say, wow, I've just made up my mind. This is absolutely clear. All of these messages were sent. None were sent there. That is when the crime happened. But there's another thing you've also got to talk about, and the affidavit does address this, is if someone dies and they are in a particular place for longer than really 2 hours, then you're going to have cadaver odor. And the longer they're there, the more potent that is going to be, and it's going to be more difficult to hide that. Even if you wash and use bleach and all that kind of thing, which we saw in the Patrick Frazee case, even if you do a huge cleanup operation, bring out the bleach, like a sea of foam and cleaning stuff, it's going to be very difficult to get rid of the cadaver odor. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that because she stopped communicating that she was no longer alive. It could actually mean that Barry just arrived home, right? Barry could just have arrived home. It could also be that she and Barry had a long conversation. It could also just be that Barry arrived home. Then you would imagine she would stop communicating. Tricia says, what time was cell phone pings running around the house? I'm not really going to go into that because we're not dealing, I've dealt with the text and that kind of thing. And we're dealing with this part of the affidavit. So I'm sure there's someone, if you've got the affidavit in front of you, I'm sure you can answer it. I don't. I'm only dealing with these pages. I kind of want to deal thoroughly with what we're dealing with and then go back to that. But if someone can answer a question, what time were these things? As far as I know, it was late in the afternoon. That's how I understand it. So 59 messages sent on May 9th. Last message from Suzanne. So that is the photo, and this text is the kind of verifying that she's alive. And it's also possible that the very last message is staged. We don't know for sure that that isn't staged, but I would imagine it's not. Libler then responds 239, 246, 247. Suzanne doesn't answer. One does wonder, was that intercepted either, how can I put it? Was it intercepted either directly where Barry's in the house and a message comes through, or was it intercepted indirectly where Barry is suspicious? And she'd mentioned this, I think, that Barry was growing more suspicious. And now, bear in mind, she's just said, I'm done. And Barry must be thinking, why? Where have you gotten this sudden resolve from? Where have you suddenly gotten this self, not confidence, but not even self-belief, but this, I think you know what I'm talking about, just this conviction, where's that come from? It's not like you're normally passive and I can tell you what to do. Suddenly you are standing up for yourself and you are not self-governing, but you are, self-centered, but not in the selfish sense of the word. Your center isn't under control, someone else's control. You're controlling yourself. So the question is, was Barry, I don't know, able to see what was going on using the iCloud? And there's another case in South Africa where I believe that was the straw that broke the camel's back, where someone was seeing remotely what was actually going on, because that is one way you can theoretically spy on somebody else's phone. Anyway, so that just is a question one's got to ask, is Libler's messages, did Barry see them? Did he see them? For another way of thinking about it is, if Suzanne was shot with a dart tranquilizer, right? and then her phone was taken away. So she's now tranquilized, she's immobile, she's paralyzed. And then her phone is taken, and someone looks at her phone and says, wow, look at what's going on here. And then they respond, or did all of that play out in like one sort of foul swoop? So the big question we asked in the previous live stream was, did Barry know about Jeff before Suzanne lost her life? Did Barry know about Jeff just before Suzanne lost her life? And I just want you to think about the Oscar Pistorius case, which happened on Valentine's Day. I think what happened there was his girlfriend, Oscar didn't make it clear that he had company on Valentine's, so that it was the morning of Valentine's Day, so the night before. He didn't make it clear on social media, I'm spending the night with my darling or whatever. So people, he was a celebrity, so you would expect him to get messages from lovers / people flirting with him. And so the question is, did his girlfriend intercept that, confront him, and then he kind of threw his toys? And in other words, that triggers this really violent explosion. There's an argument over fidelity based on something that happens on your phone at a critical time. So bear in mind, Suzanne is in her bikini, I guess she's suntanning, and then Barry arrives home. And does he announce his arrival? Does he watch her? He arrives home and he looks at her through the window, and then he sees she's texting a lot, right? Could that have happened? Does he intercept the message then? The fact that there's all of this interaction on this day of all days, it's not like there's no interaction at all, begs the question, is it relevant? If it is relevant, how relevant is it? Stephanie says she thinks that there may have been knowledge, and okay. Jean says Salida is a bit insular, cute town to visit though. So yeah, an insular town, I think, isn't Boulder quite insular as well, in, I guess, a legal sense? I mean, it feels like it was insular in the John Benet Ramsey time, or is it just an insular legal community? But that's also going to play a role in someone doing something and thinking an outsider is going to come here and they're not going to really get anywhere with the locals. The locals aren't really going to engage with them, kind of thing. I don't know. So now we go to the second point. Verizon records contain 738 calls between Libler and Suzanne's number between October 2018 and December 2019. Suzanne called Libler 74 times under international calls from the Cayman Islands between January 14 and January 18, 2019. So in 4 days, she called him around about 20 times a day, right? So you can see there's a lot going on between them. On December 18, 2020, agents contacted Libler by phone and showed him some of the results of the LinkedIn messaging and photos between him and Suzanne on May 9, 2020. So the agents actually go to Jeff Libler. Like Jeff's not giving him his, it's not like a situation where Jeff hands over his phone, hands over his social media, and the cops kind of have what they need. It's kind of the opposite. The cops have got to go digging for it and searching for it, and they find out kind of independently about Jeff, and then they confront Jeff and they say, well, look at this message, look at that, what do you think about this? It's kind of a little bit like the mistress in the Patrick Frazee case, where they also knocked on her door, and then she then cooperated. She didn't approach them. The cops had to find her. On May 9th, so, just to talk about that, December 18. So this crime happened in kind of, May 9th, 2020. So it's like until December that they're still trying to figure out Jeff Libler's involvement. So it's May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 8 months go by before they're really getting, okay, so Jeff Libler's got a role in this. And, there were a lot of us wondering, why aren't there charges coming out? Why is this case taking so long? Don't the police have any clues? Well, someone who knew a lot just wasn't helping. Someone who knew Suzanne intimately and knew what was going on to some extent with her and Barry just wasn't saying anything. Great, that's helping a lot. Thanks a lot for that. On May 9, this is the critical day, 2020, Suzanne sent a message to Libler at 11:42 a.m. that said, "Guess who's alone again?" Right? So she's engaging with them to engage, right? To have this communication. It's possible that message at 11:42 is the opening message of the 59 communications sent on the Saturday. In other words, it starts at 11:42 in the morning, so almost 12 o'clock, and it stops at 11 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, almost 2 o'clock, so arguably 2.5 hours, and in that time, 59 messages. So quite a lot of activity in that short space of time, in 2 hours. So obviously, message response, whatever. Now we know that Suzanne was spying on Barry with a spy pin. Wasn't Barry spying on Suzanne? Wasn't he looking for some way to find out what was on her phone? On May 9th, regarding May 9th, Libler told agents that the message meant they were free to talk, and Suzanne was not surprised that Barry left her alone at home, meaning on the Saturday. Something I've been meaning to say for a while is, think about the context and the situation from Barry's perspective. Whether or not Barry knows about the affair, it's a Saturday, it's a nice warm day. Suzanne is suntanning, she's in a bikini, she's relaxed, she's enjoying her kind of dalliance with Jeff. She's kind of happy, she's kind of resolved to leave Barry. It's kind of like a turning point. She's also kind of in quite a good position. She's inherited a lot of money. She doesn't really need to work. She's healthy. She doesn't have cancer anymore, but she's kind of relaxing, unwinding, suntanning, feeling like the warmth of life and all that, right? That's what she's doing. Meanwhile, Barry's seems to be working, right? It's a Saturday and Barry is working. Barry's toiling. Barry doesn't have the luxury of kind of luxuriating or suntanning or kind of, leisure. Barry's got to work. Suzanne doesn't have to work. And just think about that, just that basic thing of, haven't you ever been in the situation where you have a sibling almost your age, and one of you's got to write a very important exam, and the other one either's already written the exam or for whatever reason isn't writing it. So one of you has got all of this tension and stress and has got to study and concentrate, and I can't have noises, and I've got a deadline and blah, 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 blah. But the other one can do whatever they want. They can watch TV, they can listen to music, they can have friends over. And so that creates like a tension of its own in terms of the one being completely free and the other one being extremely limited, right? And doesn't that create a resentment? Just that dynamic, right? Gold Star says Jeff was stringing her along. Goldstar's opinion. Carol says, I seriously doubt she rode a bike Saturday. DTC says, focused on fitness and self-care. She actually was training to be a fitness instructor or something. I know that's relevant somewhere along the line. I'm not sure. Okay, so let's just continue here. So again, Stephanie, just watch for comments that are like basically defamatory to Barry and basically calling Barry names and so on, because it's just legally quite sensitive. Okay, what we really want to pay attention to is the affidavit and discuss that, not kind of put up our hands and say Barry's definitely guilty, Barry, or even for Jeff Libler. We don't really want to be making accusations or insulting people. We want to be looking at the evidence. You can decide how that looks kind of yourself, kind of thing. And just bear in mind, if you do that, then I can't, if you are going to be saying Barry definitely whatever, then I can't really continue with these analysis, because you're actually breaking the law. It is a case of innocent until proven guilty. So you might think social media is the Wild West and you can say whatever you like, but actually no. And that's already come up in some of the legal conversations. Bear in mind, Barry has got 2 daughters, and so this is a legally sensitive thing, okay? Yeah, no, Stephanie, it's just I'm seeing people saying things about Jeff Libler as well. Try not to like insult people. We can talk about the evidence, but try not to be like this or that, if that makes sense. And the reason I'm saying it is we had a very legally sensitive time. So that's really the reason for it. The case is about to go to trial, kind of thing. Okay, so Libler confirmed that Suzanne's message at 2:11 p.m. I'm on WA referred to as starting WhatsApp. Okay, so I don't really know that, but I'm glad that my assumption is correct. Do you guys use WhatsApp? It's very useful for sending photos, videos. It's just a very seamless way of communicating. It doesn't cost anything. Anyway, so they could share video with each other. So one of the nice things with WhatsApp is you can, it's almost like having a video call, and it's quite likely that they did. From referencing the LinkedIn messages before and after, Libler does not believe they used WhatsApp at that time or later that day. So that is quite a weird thing that is being said there, is that so Suzanne's final message is I'm on WhatsApp, but then Jeff said, I don't think we actually did WhatsApp. So here it is. Suzanne sent her final photo on LinkedIn at 2:03 p.m. So it doesn't make sense that you would want to go off LinkedIn onto WhatsApp, but it seems like that was the intention, but then it just never happened. Okay. Libler's message to Suzanne at 2:46 p.m. was, hey, your weather looks great. And that may have been in reference to the picture she sent earlier, or to Libler checking conditions in Colorado through the internet. I would just think that she's in a bikini, she's smiling, she's kind of next to the pool, that you would say that. You wouldn't like go and check the weather and then say that. Suzanne never answered that message or subsequent messages by Libler wishing her a happy Mother's Day on May 10th. From the return, so I think this is quite important just to stress. I mean, it's obvious, but I think it's important to stress. It feels like the very last thing Suzanne did on May 9th was send messages to her lover. It seems like the very last thing Suzanne did was communicate with someone she wasn't married to. right? And if you think about that and you think about Chris Watts, what is the very last thing Chris Watts did before he murdered Shanann? And the answer is he had that 111-minute conversation. In other words, something going on right until the moment, and then something happens. In other words, you're so caught up in something else, right? That is creating new dynamics and new driving forces. But then also the question is, so if that's happening, what is that doing to someone else? Once again, it's this thing of you have a fairy tale. So I'm having this fairy tale romance with somebody. Oh, but I'm married. Well, your fairy tale romance might be a nightmare to someone else. Also, your fairy tale, but the fact that you're married, your partner might be a nightmare threatening your fairy tale. That's just kind of the scenario. Let's just look at your comments. Sherry says, Barry seemed to have the habit of turning his phone to airplane mode. Can you explain this? I just think putting your phone onto airplane mode means you can't be tracked, right? Putting your phone on airplane mode is a little bit like turning it off. In fact, in the Amanda Knox case, what was very strange was that she turned her phone off on the night in question, right? And then the phone came back on the next morning. So it's also like, wow, why would you, on a weekend, why would you just turn your phone off? So I turn my phone onto airplane mode all the time, but the reason is I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to respond to certain things because I'm working. But you can also, in a true crime scenario, think about airplane mode or turning your phone off is a way that you can't be tracked based on something you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. Something, and in the Chris Watts case, there is also a little bit of that as well. Shanann's phone is turned off. That's coming up more and more. In the Patrick Frazee case, there's also the phone turned on, off, moving somewhere as well. In the Patrick Frazee case, what makes that case so interesting is how successfully the phone was used to suggest proof of life, staged texts, the phone being somewhere else and the perpetrator being somewhere else, and that suggesting she was alive to some extent successfully. Of course, he had a accomplice, and that made that a lot easier. Sarah Glenn said, did they have Live 360 or follow each other on the iPhone? I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. But Yvonne Phillips just summarizes that very succinctly, a way to hide activity. Absolutely. Okay, so from the return of the search warrant on Libler's Verizon phone, Libler used the same Michigan switch, I think it's market ID 227 for all 23 communications from May 7 to 11, 2020, as he did on the day of the November 13, 2020 interview with agents at the office of the FBI in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Following the interview, Libler sent agents a screenshot of his credit card charges for his Costco wholesale credit card under the name Jeffrey S. Libler for May 2020. I am sort of wondering whether the authorities are looking at this just to establish his alibi. So where was your credit card? Okay. A footnote here reads, FBI agents showed this May 9, 2020, 2:44 p.m. photo of Suzanne to Barry multiple times in March and April 2021. So it seemed, I don't know whether they showed it to him before this, but it seems like they took a year basically to show Barry this photo of Suzanne, and they would show it to him, ask him about it again, and they say it may be the last proof of life of her independent of Barry. So regardless of what Barry said about her, that she went for a mountain bike ride, she usually went in the evening. I think that's what Jeff Libler said. Blah, blah, blah. This is the last proof of life. So we know she was alive. It's quite strange. It says here, May 9, 2020, 2:44 p.m., photo of Suzanne. And I mean, above that it says, Suzanne sent this photo to Libler on LinkedIn at 2:03 p.m. So I'm a little bit confused here. She sends the photo on LinkedIn at 2:03, but then it says 2:44 p.m. photo. I'm not sure if it's a time zone difference when Libler got it. I don't quite understand that. Do you guys understand it? Pamela says the fact that they can see he's switched his phone to airplane mode shows they know a lot. I don't know if it's that. I mean, these days, if you even look at the fact that they can tell when his car door opened and closed every time his car stopped and started. The GPS tracking on a vehicle now is at a, I don't want to say microscopic level, but at a very, that kind of metadata is very, very detailed. So, I don't know if it's really rocket science to say, wow, you turned your phone off on airplane mode or not. I do think in a lot of these cases, Chris Watts, Patrick Frazee, and Barry Morphew, you have these odd situations where it's like, you are actually on CCTV footage. Didn't you know that? And it's kind of like they did know it, but they thought it would be fine. Like Chris Watts knew about the camera from his neighbor, but he thought it would be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. Patrick Frazee knew that his neighbor had CCTV footage right on the front door showing him going in and out, and he actually committed murder at that time. And he thought it would be okay. It wasn't. Same thing with Letitia Stork. I don't know whether she knew that the neighbors had certain cameras, but they could track her movements. So it seems like people are aware that they can be tracked, but they think they can nevertheless outsmart the authorities. You can delete data, and sometimes that's quite effective, but you can never delete everything. And in Barry's case, he actually took a photo of that really damning message, inadvertently swiped, and that actually took a photo of the I'm done message. So often in the effort to delete information, the thing I always say is, in a true crime situation where you've got someone who's somewhat suspicious or very closely related to the incident, if they've deleted phone messages recently or dealing with recent events, that is definitely a big red flag. And I think you have that in the Summer Wells case, where you actually have her parents have deleted messages and information on their phones. Why on earth would you do that? Stephanie says some people put phones on airplane mode to save battery life. Good point. So one of the ways you would analyze this, again, now you look at this from the prosecution perspective, or you look at it from the defense perspective. So the defense might say, you know what, Barry wanted to save his battery life. He had an older model, blah, 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 and, the battery was whatever, and so that was why he was doing it. The prosecution could say, if you go through the record of Barry's phone, I don't know what the answer is, I'm just speculating here, but in the previous day, that's quite important, he didn't put his phone on airplane mode. The day before that, he didn't put his phone on airplane mode. The day before that, typically on Sundays, he doesn't put his phone on airplane mode, whatever it is. In other words, this is the pattern of airplane mode. Well, on the 9th, wow, it's weird. He put it on airplane mode again and again and again, on, off, on, off. In other words, is there a pattern to this? And is the pattern sort of fairly regular or random, and so it doesn't mean anything, or is this very, very irregular? Is it very strange? Is it very unusual? And given what is actually taking place, is it very, very unusual, right? So you want to look at the patterns of that kind of thing. Another pattern that I think is very overlooked in true crime is bedtime. What time do you normally go to bed? What time do you normally wake up? And usually with families, it's quite regular. It's normally at this time, normally at that time. So with Barry, something that stands out is, why did Barry work on a Sunday? And I think it was Suzanne's father. I could be wrong. I think Suzanne's father, Gene, said he never worked on a Sunday. The other thing to bear in mind is Barry comes across, certainly in Jason Morphew's assessment, as a very pious dude, that he really talks a big talk about God and that God is a big deal in his life. So what on earth is Brian doing working on a Sunday? And it's Mother's Day. Tapo EMT is here. Good to see you. I said you still got the wings of Gabby Petito as your avatar. Zircon says out of the norm. Carol says Barry claimed they had a nice evening dinner and sex together. Yeah, right. I'm not sure if I buy that either, because we have the same thing with Chris Watts. They also had sex. I don't think they did. The other thing that's very interesting, we're still going to get to it, is they apparently had dinner, but then why was there only one plate? You have a similar situation with the Chris Watts case in a way where he made a chicken barbecue, but then there was also only one plate. So you've also got to ask, what about his kids? Did he not make the barbecue for them? Sunflowers says, does the cloud capture everything? I wish I could answer that. I don't actually use the iCloud myself. I'm an Android user. I'm not an expert in that area, but I do know the iCloud is a very kind of like a comprehensive archive of a lot of detail. I would imagine it captures a heck of a lot. When you say everything, I'm not quite sure what you mean, but I would imagine it captures a heck of a lot. It's not always that straightforward that something that is captured, I don't know whether Apple have changed their legal privacy thing, but I know the Oscar Pistorius case, they couldn't actually get access to his phone. Then they had to travel to America to speak to, not sure if it was the FBI or to Apple or both, but ultimately by the time they accessed his phone, there was nothing on it. So that I don't know if that is an issue anymore, but it's certainly an issue with the Oscar Pistorius case. They did actually find out that Oscar's phone was remote accessed by an avatar called Titanium Hulk, but that's a separate story. Pamela says his kids were on a road trip. Okay, so we've basically just covered one page and an hour has gone by. I'm going to try and speed up. So again, I just find it a bit odd that Jeff would say there was no discussion on WhatsApp when you had all of that discussion. That could mean two things. Either there was a discussion, it was deleted, and Jeff's not telling the truth, which I don't think is the case. I think it is at the moment that Suzanne wanted to migrate the conversation to kind of video chat and the whole seamless thing with WhatsApp. Barry came back home, and Barry may have overheard some of, when I say overheard, I kind of mean, I don't know if there was actual talking, but he may have seen there's a lot of this typing going on her phone, maybe even saw her taking the selfie, I don't know. But Barry seemed to interrupt the transition from LinkedIn to WhatsApp. If not, then you've got to say, well, what did interrupt it? Why would she get ready? I mean, the whole thing started with saying, guess what, I'm alone. So why would she stop? Well, guess what, I'm not alone anymore. but she doesn't even have a chance to do that. She doesn't have a chance to say, "Hi, Jeff, hold on, I'm not alone." She doesn't have a chance to say that, which suggests that she's not alone, but she doesn't know she's not alone, so she doesn't have a chance to do that. As it's a possibility. Okay, so now we're on page 18. Noted charges are from Wixom, Michigan for $292.40 at Menards on May 7, 2020, a charge of $26.58 in Howell, Michigan on May 9. This is really just showing where Jeff was at this time. Just thinking about that, you can almost imagine on social media people saying, I think Jeff could be involved. This is all Jeff. Well, this proves that he couldn't have been involved, or that he very likely wasn't involved. Simple thing like that. And you can speculate all you like, but here it is kind of in black and white. He did this charge, that charge, that charge. You have the same thing in the John Benet Ramsey case. People say, I think it was the older brother, meaning John Andrew. He went to a movie that night and he was in a different state. It's as simple as that. And then yet 25 years later, people are still speculating, I think it could be that person. Get informed, get informed. And, I hope a year from now, people aren't still saying, I wonder if Jeff could have been involved. He's not involved. He's got an alibi, right? It also says these charges are consistent with home improvement stores and the dock project Libler told agents he was working on in the days leading up to and through Mother's Day weekend at his Michigan residence. Another question to ask is, who was with Jeff when he was at his Michigan residence? Was he alone there? I mean, he had to be able to communicate with Suzanne. Well, was there no one around him? Libler also messaged Suzanne on the 7th of May, January, February, March, April, May, saying that he went to Menards. So he even messaged that. And Suzanne asked him 2 days later whether he had finished his doc. So all of that just gives you maybe not like an ironclad, absolutely 100% alibi, but it's certainly going to be adequate, I would say. Now we go to, and this is really, really interesting. Now we're going to go to Barry's statements. He doesn't make one or two, he makes so many. It's not like the Chris Watts case where he basically makes 3 or 4 statements. Barry makes one after the other, after the other, after the other. And then the great thing with that, when anybody does that, is you can cross-reference what they say again and again and again and say, oh, yeah, you've now departed from your version. There you've departed again. This part doesn't match again and again and again. Terry says, Menards is a hardware store, made an excuse to get out of the house to message Suzanne. Okay, so here we go. Section 3, Barry's initial statements, May 2020 to July 2020. Fasten your seatbelts. Your affiant selected statements from some of the interviews of Barry with CBI, Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI from May 2020 through July 2020. So that's May, June, July. These are statements from just 3 months. And there are many more. It's not just that he spoke during this time. So this is the one sort of chapter of Barry's statements. There are several. As I say, this is really fascinating, and you really want to pay attention to this to see how it differs over time. So where it differs over time and how and why. So it says here, to include substantial changes that Barry makes in an attempt to fit any evidence presented to him by CBI agents. Now, if you understand true crime, you have a weird exchange taking place. We saw it in the Chris Watts case, but you see it very often. And you often see it in trials as well, is the defendant knows by far the most, this is where the defendant is guilty, of course. The defendant knows by far the most exactly what took place. They know the time, they know the circumstances, they know all the details. But what the defendant doesn't know is what the prosecution, law enforcement, the authorities, investigators, what they know, right? So the defendant kind of has a bit of an edge over everybody else. They committed the crime, they know what happened, they know all the details, the time, the place, everything. Also the evidence that is potentially left behind. The other side just have tiny fragments here and then they're trying to put it together. And so the trick that the defendant's got to try and pull is to, first of all, find out what the prosecution knows, find out what law enforcement knows, find out what evidence they have, and then find ways of covering up or connecting those pieces of evidence and saying, oh, no, that's completely normal. I was shooting deer, or I, whatever, blah, 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 some kind of reason that sort of makes sense. But the problem may be you come up with a reason for something, but then further down the line, you've given a different reason, now they don't line up. So now you're in a bit of trouble. But the issue is you still have the advantage that you know all the details, they only know some of them. And so you can neutralize some of your own evidence by explaining it away. It's just the same concept of covering something up, this time with words, in terms of real evidence. So let's just deal, I'd really like to go into this in more detail, dealing with some of other cases like Oscar Pistorius and the evidence that was left behind and how I explained it, but let's just go into it. So this is the first interview he gave, and it was May 13th. And I understand this is a kind of a formal interview. So basically it's 3 days after the events. I don't really count May 9th because no one really knew what had happened. So I count May 10th as really the first day. And that day is also kind of, the day they realize she's missing. So, but it's basically 3 days after Suzanne disappears that they actually formally interview Barry, which shows that he was someone they were thinking about pretty early on. It wasn't like months went by and they were like, okay, it could be an abductor, it could be this. In the Madeleine McCann case, you kind of had a situation where there seemed to be initial suspicion about the parents, but then they put that aside. And then months went by, and then they only formally interviewed them sort of in, very late August, early September. With the Ramseys as well, you had that sort of, we're a little bit suspicious of you, this doesn't really line up, but we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And then they only interviewed them months and months later. You don't have that with Barry. You don't have them not talking to him formally for months. They spoke to him 3 days later. It's quite important just to stress that they were already suspicious fairly early on. And you get that from the body cam as well, don't you? And so the question is that suspicion justified? And then also, is that suspicion justified legally? Can you show that that's just, it's one thing to say, well, I'm a little bit suspicious here. Well, is that justified in a legal sense? That's a different argument. Do you have proof? Do you have real reason to believe this kind of thing? As a Jensen says, okay. Heather says, it always amazes me how easily people can lie and think on their feet. Pamela Smith puts a bunch of squirrels there, which I guess are like chipmunks. Carol says, chipmunks don't have a season to hunt. Okay. Okay, right. So let's go through this now. Okay, here we go. On May 13, 2020, CBI agent Joseph Cahill and Shafie County Sheriff's Office Detective Robin Burgess interviewed Barry. Barry provided a background of his marriage to Suzanne, his daughters. The next part's redacted. I don't know why it would be. His marriage to Suzanne, his daughters. What else would that be? Something, and their living arrangements. Barry explained they resided in Arcadia, Indiana until approximately 2018. At that time, he sold his landscaping business, BLM Landscaping, and other real properties and moved to the residence at 19057 Puma Path, Salida, Chaffee County. So what is really important here, and you'll see it over and over again in true crime, and if you want to just think about the war in Ukraine right now as a true crime, the big daddy of true crime. It's a war is like the murder of millions of people, can be hundreds, thousands, whatever. If you want to start figuring out what's going on, you don't like just go to the end and say what's happening right now. You don't go to the crime scene. Where do you start? You start at the beginning. You start with the backstory. So you want to know Vladimir Putin's backstory. You want to know how the nation of Ukraine came into being. I'm just saying you might not think that the place to start isn't right at the beginning, meaning the beginning of the day, although that's important. You want to go into the backstory. You want to find out the dynamics. You want to find out who a person is. You want to find out who a person really is, and you want to find out who the person says he is, and if there's a difference. So they say Barry provided a background of his marriage, so particularly a background in terms of his marriage, but also the circumstances surrounding that, the finances, why are you moving, what was going on that you moved from where you were, what was wrong with where you were staying, how long did you live in Arcadia, and why did you move when you did move. And what is quite interesting is when you go through that, Suzanne had family members dying one after the other, and then she would inherit, and then she had quite a lot of money. She had almost $500,000, and it's also like a situation that her father was quite elderly, and she would then be inheriting from there as well. And she had cancer, and so now it's a situation of, wow, you've inherited money, you've got cancer, and well, let's move. Right? And you've got to wonder, is there something more beyond that? So then you can also say, did Barry need money? Was Barry financially secure? Was he a good husband? Was he a good worker? These would be all questions the authorities would want to know. One thing you would want to know is, was BLM Landscaping a good business? If it was, well, did it make sense to start a business in Colorado? Was his business successful? Well, I don't know if it would be successful if he needed to borrow money. Also, you got to ask, were they living beyond their means? What kind of house did they live in Indiana? What kind of house did they live in Colorado? Anyway, it says, at the time he sold his landscaping business, one would want to know how much he got for it. Other real properties moved to the residence. Barry is an avid hunter and outdoorsman. That comes across right in the beginning. We're getting a sense of how Barry, as a person, as a potential suspect, is different to other people and other people in the true crime sense. Does the fact that he's a hunter, is it, if he's almost a school teacher, does that mean he's harmless necessarily? Does the fact that he's a hunter mean he's likely more harmless or less harmless? Does he hunt rabbits, like harmless little things, or does he hunt bears? And what is he a hardcore kind of hunter, or is he a sort of a, you get some people who are fishermen. Would you say that is a hardcore hunter? So there are different levels to that. That's also going to play potentially a role in the crime scene. Are you going to find the person indoors or outdoors? Well, does it depend on whether they're an outdoorsman or not? Now think about Brian and Gabby. Both of their bodies were found outdoors. Both of them were committed to this outdoor adventure. So that's their psychology. So in a weird way, reverse engineering that, you could say it would make sense given everything that was going on. They weren't at home. The idea was to be in the great outdoors. Well, that's where you're going to find them. And that is where they were found. In terms of Suzanne and Barry, is this story here that she she is outside somewhere, or is that a contrivance? Barry, an avid hunter and outdoorsman, explained they moved to Salida to be closer to blank. I guess that's to their daughter, who attends Western State University in Gunnison, Colorado. So it seems like his reason for them leaving is because they just want to be closer to their daughter. I doubt that's the case. I mean, I doubt that's the full reason. In other words, you would imagine they want to change the scenery. You would imagine they wouldn't just move there to be closer to their daughter. Anyway, there could be other reasons as well. One or the other could be having an affair in Indiana, and they want to just start a new chapter in their lives. Also, the age that they were when they moved is really significant. Anyway, Barry stated that he, Suzanne, and somebody reside at, I guess that's their daughters, reside at 19057 Puma Path. There are no other persons who live at this address. Oh, so I think that part that's redacted is the daughters' names, where it says Barry provided a background of his marriage to Suzanne, his daughters, and I think their names are mentioned, and then their living arrangements. Another thing that's really important is sleeping arrangements. Not only the time you go to sleep and wake up, but in which room do you normally sleep, and who sleeps in the same room, and especially if you've got young children, that can also be quite important. Anyway, so in the Chris Watts case, the sleeping arrangements, sleeping habits were very important. The children waking up when the garage door opens. Barry stated he has a family Verizon cellular phone account for his something. I guess it's his business, Suzanne's something, along with, well, all of this is redacted, along with redacted and redacted phones. Barry has an iPhone 5S. He did not know the model of Suzanne's Apple cell phone, but knew it was pink in color. But that does show they were both using iPhones and that there was likely an iCloud scenario here. Barry stated he's the owner of Sunset Farms, LLC, a landscaping company in Salida. Additionally, he works as a subcontractor for Disland Structures Incorporated, DSI, a general contracting company in Salida. So he's a landscaper and he's working in construction. You get the idea that he's possibly working quite hard, but is he getting ahead? And are these jobs kind of paying for this massive house that they're living in? Is it able to pay for them living so large? You know, being a landscaper and a construction worker, and his wife's not really working. Barry stated he has several contracted employees. His primary contract is Morgan Gentile. Her name has come up quite a few times. Barry stated that Morgan previously worked with him at DSI until she was fired about 1 year ago. When she was terminated, he hired her as a contractor. Barry stated he's also a volunteer firefighter with the Chaffee County Fire District. He is assigned to Maysville Station 5. Barry stated that Suzanne is technically unemployed. That's quite important. As I said, on the day that I think she died, she's not working, but she hasn't been working all week. Here's Barry even working on a weekend. It's hot. He's working on a weekend. Everyone is enjoying themselves. His daughters are camping. His wife is lying by the pool, flirting, and he's the only kind of dog's body running around trying to, do what needs to be done. Do you think he resents that? Barry's supposed to be the hero, right? So it says here that although Suzanne is technically unemployed, she would complete the invoicing for Sunset Farm. So she would be familiar with the finances. And she talks about that to some extent, about the finances not being great. Barry stated he and Suzanne have all joint banking accounts, also important. Bank of the West, Collegiate, Peaks Bank, and a 501c3 nonprofit, Suzanne R. Morphew Hope Foundation. Barry stated they have other holdings with Morgan Stanley, and he uses E-Trade. He also trades in silver and gold. This is quite important, that Barry kind of speculates, and I don't think, as far as I'm aware, not very successfully with silver. So he seemed, if I understand correctly, seemed to have taken or borrowed or had access to some of Suzanne's money and speculated on silver, for example, and Suzanne complains about that at one point. I don't know whether he had other successes at other times, but they had joint banking accounts, which means if Suzanne's no longer there, he still has access to them. You didn't really have that apparently with Chris Watts. Or he said that he didn't know how to get into Shannon's account. But yeah, it's made quite clear that they have joint banking accounts, which just tells you that Barry has access to the money that's in there. You know, sounds straightforward, but it's quite important to know this. And this is something the police care about. Tell us about your banking. Then Barry says he owns a black 2013 Ford F350 and a grey 2015 Ford 250 vehicle. And both of these vehicles really speak about toughness and, you know, I'm a big man riding a big truck. You know, it's kind of emphasizing the masculinity, the hardness, the toughness, the sort of Barry the hero, this larger than life figure. You know, it's not just one big truck, it's two very big trucks. You know what, in South Africa, we don't even have, we have Ford F250s, I think. And I was actually thinking of buying one, but it literally doesn't fit in my garage. And I also thought it's a little bit too much for me. I don't really need to be that, what's the word? I don't need to be that, I know what the Afrikaans word, windgat, it basically means bragging, like a braggadocious sort of person. I don't really need to be that, my ego doesn't need to be pushed out that much. Macho, that's it. So I think that is a big part of his personality, is he is macho, he's very masculine. And so you can also imagine if you're macho and someone's cheating on you, what's that going to feel like? If you're this big man, but your wife doesn't love you and actually loves somebody else, loves your high school buddy, how are you going to feel about that? If you've got this huge ego and you're driving these big trucks, meanwhile your wife's like, I actually like that guy, right? So that's really something just to consider, is the image that he is trying to convey, and a lot of people do convey a certain image through what they drive, right? Barry said that Suzanne frequently uses Snapchat to communicate with her friends and daughters. Barry stated Suzanne also uses Instagram and Facebook. Now, that's quite an interesting thing, is at this point the cops are asking Barry for like information. How can we sort of track what Suzanne's saying? Right? How can we, like, if it's possible that Suzanne was doing something, or how can we, where can we look? And he says, well, go to Snapchat, go to Instagram, and go to Facebook. Well, do you think any one of those three were really going to lead the police anywhere? Because actually where she was communicating was LinkedIn and WhatsApp. So I think a valid question to ask is, did Barry know about WhatsApp? Did he not know at all? Did he know that Suzanne was using WhatsApp at all? Did he ever WhatsApp Suzanne? It's just quite interesting that he doesn't actually mention that at all. He doesn't mention LinkedIn, and he doesn't mention LinkedIn. I can kind of understand. WhatsApp, did he really not know that his wife uses WhatsApp? Like if someone had to ask me, you know, what does your girlfriend use? I would say immediately Facebook a lot and WhatsApp, right? no LinkedIn, email, not really, quite a lot of calls and texts as well, but you tend to know those that you are close to what they use. If you had to ask her, what do I use? I don't know if she would know that well, but I'm sure she would say Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and he's not on Facebook that much. I think she would know to say that. So you just wonder, why wouldn't someone's husband know what social media they use? Either Suzanne kept it a really closely guarded secret, or Barry knew and he didn't say that. It would just be interesting to know, did Barry have WhatsApp on his phone? Did Barry ever WhatsApp? So it would be interesting to know, did his daughters ever WhatsApp? Just would be interesting to know that kind of thing. So now we're on page 19. Let's just have a look at some of your comments. Amy Hall has said good night. Carol says, it seems it was tit for tat. He always wanted status in homes, trucks, and his wife. I do think status is quite a big one. Terry Dean, thanks a lot. Small token of my appreciation for Nick eclipsing all other coverage of relevant true crime. Do I? Thanks for growing crucial critical thinking. I hope I am. I hope that is happening. Okay, so let's continue here. Thanks a lot for that, Terry. I appreciate it. So we're now on page 19 of 129. Barry's two emails accounts are blah, 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 and blah, 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 both redacted. Interesting that he's got two email accounts. Barry stated that Suzanne typically wakes up and has coffee. She reads her Bible and emails. She then rides a mountain bike around the neighborhood and then does other things around the house. So he's making the case here that Suzanne typically, I guess, because it says typically wakes up, blah, 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 then she rides a mountain bike around their neighborhood. So what he's already saying here is that she typically rides a mountain bike kind of in the morning and in their neighborhood. And that was something, I think it was Jeff Libler said that, I can't remember if it was it Jeff Libler or who else would know. I think it was Jeff Libler said that she doesn't ride her bike really in the neighborhood. She drives somewhere. I'm the same way. And we're talking about the Camelback being in the vehicle. Why was she actually riding with that? Because she didn't have a water bottle. That was a big insight from the previous analysis of the affidavit. The other thing was that, so she doesn't ride her mountain bike in the morning. It tends to be the evening, and also doesn't ride in their neighborhood. And so Barry is saying two things here that are quite different. And it kind of makes sense in a scenario of a staged scenario to say it would make sense that on the morning of Mother's Day, she went for a mountain bike ride, right? Isn't that what's being suggested? That, I mean, she couldn't have gone the night of the mountain bike, the night of when I think she had actually died, May 9th, because Barry said he had sex with her and they had a nice dinner, so she was still around. So she had to have gone for the mountain bike ride after he left, and fairly early in the morning because he left even earlier, so someone wouldn't necessarily have seen her. So she went early in the morning, he went even earlier, and then she disappeared. No one saw because she went so early. That seems to be being suggested here. It's kind of a parallel to the Lacey Peterson case where Lacey goes for a walk with a dog. How do we know? Because the dog is running around the garden with a leash on and there's some kind of wet, dewy grass on the leash. Well, actually, Lacey didn't go for a walk. In fact, Lacey probably, I actually think Lacey had died the night before. It's not like she, anyway, that's a separate story. but do you see what's going on here? It's like this idea of the mountain biking, her patterns of behavior being set here, but are they true? And why would you embellish that? So again, it's another one of those little pieces of the puzzle where you say, if you were making up a video, 10 what the ifs in the Barry Morphew affidavit, this wouldn't be one of them. You wouldn't say, why the heck did Barry say that she cycled in the neighborhood and went in the morning, typically, when she didn't? That wouldn't really be a smoking gun, what the F, because it's like, okay, well, it's not really. But if you think about it, why on earth, if that's not the case, would you say that? And it's possible that it is the case. It is possible that she did cycle in the neighborhood typically, that she did wake up and in the morning go mountain biking, but Jeff says otherwise. So between Jeff and Barry, we must find out whose version is actually accurate. You'd imagine that Barry would know, but then I guess you could also ask his daughters. I suppose you could also ask the neighbors. I suppose you could also ask Sheila. I'm not sure she would know, but you could find out. But you would need to ascertain that. Otherwise, it's Barry's word against Suzanne's. I suppose you could also say, did other mountain bikers ever see Suzanne early in the morning in that neighborhood? Because that tends to happen. You cycle, you come across other people. Conversely, did other people mountain biking come across Suzanne in the evening or in the afternoon, typically? Goes on to say, on occasion, Suzanne rode the Methodist Trails area. Barry further explained that on Sundays she virtually attended their church Salida Grace, meaning online. The service is broadcast on YouTube and generally lasts about 1 hour. So if you were brand new to this case, if all you knew about this case was you were reading this section of the affidavit, what should stand out to you are these references to the Bible. In this particular paragraph, Barry says she reads the Bible every morning. She wakes up and reads the Bible, and then her emails. And then it also says that she attends church, right? And so you're getting a sense that she's a good woman, a Christian woman, a believer, all kind of, you're getting that kind of straight up. And I don't think that's not true. I think you could also argue that the Morphews, Barry, Suzanne, but also the other Morphews and also the Mormons probably are generally God-fearing folk, Christian folk. So that is becoming part of the fabric here, Christianity. And you can also then say, are they really genuine good folk? And that's quite a complicated question, because if you take Suzanne, the fact that she's having an affair doesn't mean that she's a bad human being through and through. A lot of people do certain things wrong. I think that's a little bit different to you can be a Christian and commit murder and say, well, he's still a good person. I think you can say someone can have an affair and still be a good person, have a good heart, be a kind, genuine person that I think Suzanne was. But I think you can be a fake Christian, but a strong Christian, and possibly commit murder. Well, then which Christian is the real Christian, or which Christian is a truly good person? And so the Christianity can actually be something that confuses you. It makes you not sure who someone really is or what's really going on there. And that's definitely an issue in the Laurie Vallow case. Well, I'm surprised we've got 170 people this late. I wonder if some people are tuning in from Australia, but it's good to have you in here. Thanks for that, Misa man. So Barry stated that he typically works until about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and returns home. That's in the evening. So what's quite interesting is that he returns on the Sunday, and I think that's something he should have really stressed. Is when are you normally home on a Sunday, right? But I do think it's interesting that he returns home kind of after dark, like, oh, where's Suzanne? Oh, I guess she must have gone mountain biking late, and okay, so well, I'm back after that has happened. Anyway, so I guess he's referring, we don't have the actual recording here, so it's difficult to know. I wonder whether we will, but it says that he typically works until 5 or 6 and returns home. Is that on weekdays, weekends, not specified? They have dinner and he usually goes to bed around 9 p.m. So here you're getting that all important nighttime ritual, the sleeping arrangements, and all of that. And so the question is, did he go to bed at 9 that night? Barry stated they typically sleep in the same bed. However, if he's snoring, he will sleep in the bonus room on the couch. I think that's quite an interesting comment. Bear in mind what Barry probably wants to do here is convey that they have a good marriage, that they have a happy marriage, that they have a perfect marriage. But they don't, or they didn't, or it seems like they didn't, since Suzanne was having an affair. And possibly you could take that further and say, given the fact that Suzanne's disappeared, seems like their marriage really wasn't very good. If that's relevant, does seem to be relevant. The judge Lama has said, well, we can't talk about certain things. So that's a little bit of a problem. But I think it's quite interesting that he says, we normally slept together, but if I was snoring, I would go and sleep in the other room. Do you think that is just completely normal? Do you think that is just a neutral comment? Given that with Chris Watts, their marriage wasn't very good, and then he was sleeping in the basement. So I don't know. There are a lot of ladies here. Do you, if your marriage is good, would you tell your husband to go and sleep in another room if he's snoring? Let's have a quick check here. If you are in a good marriage, would you tell your husband or partner or boyfriend or whatever, would you say, can you please go and sleep in another room if you're snoring? Yes, you would. Okay. Firefly says no way. Someone else says no. Sherry Long says no, but some of you do say yes. So that's kind of a 50-50 one, I guess, to some extent. I guess it also depends on how bad the snoring is. I guess one's also going to ask the question, how badly does Barry snore? Maybe his daughters would know that. Cheryl says, I can't stand snoring. Stephanie says, I've left to go to the couch. So my experience has really just been, I've been in a situation where I snore, and I've been in a situation where the person next to me snores, and our solution is really just, if I snore, bump me or wake me up or whatever. And if you snoring, I'll also do that. I'll just sort of nudge you a little bit out of it. But it's I don't know if it's ever really happened that you go and sleep somewhere else. But I guess it's personal. Delcy says, after a while, one blocks the snoring. So the thing to bear in mind is that he acknowledges that he sometimes sleeps on the couch. And the question is it because he's snoring, or is it also because they're arguing? Bear in mind they are arguing. So let me just ask you this question. Do you think every time Barry has slept on the couch, and I think it is a fact that he has slept on the couch, do you think he's sleeping on the couch because he's snoring? Do you think that is the reason every time he slept on the couch is because he's snoring? Do you see what I'm saying? It is giving an excuse for sleeping on the couch. Maybe sometimes it's true, but is it true all the time? Stephanie says, I nudge, but sometimes it persists. It can persist. Sometimes you've got to kick. Yeah. Terry says snoring is typically worse after drinking, at least moderately. So let me just say that again. Barry is saying he went to sleep on the couch sometimes, and that happened when he was snoring. I'm saying maybe that was the reason. I haven't really been in that situation, but certainly, do you think every single time he slept on the couch was because he was snoring? Sarah says he might also want to look at his phone on the couch. Good point. But I think what that is just acknowledging is opening the door to say they could have been arguing and then he sleeps on the couch. Now, let me ask you this. Given all those text messages with all those LinkedIn messages and the selfie, do you really think Suzanne slept with Barry that night? It's the same thing with Nicole Kessinger and Shanann Watts. Suzanne is in love with Jeff and it's quite a big deal. Do you think she wants to sleep now with Barry? She just told him it's done. If she sleeps with him after she's told him it's done, Barry's going to kind of be confused. He's going to kind of want to again. Do you think Suzanne wants things to kind of roll along? Or do you think she wants to kind of be like, you there, I'm there, we actually going our separate ways, right? So that's the one thing to stress. The other one is, do you think Suzanne is going to want to sleep in the same bed as Barry after she says, I'm done? That's kind of a harder one to answer, but it's kind of also like not necessarily. If they're arguing, and it feels like they are arguing, I'm done on May 6th, and then Barry on Mother's Day is not even at home. On the day before, he's not at home for much of the day. Do you think that they are this happy couple doing things together, and then they would go and sleep together, eat dinner together and sleep together, or do you think that they wouldn't? Do you think that they would, this is talking about sleeping arrangements, do you think that they would, that they were, and that they would have slept together, slept in the same bed together that night, all things being equal? I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think it's a question worth asking. And really the only people who could answer that is Suzanne, Barry, to some extent their daughters, in terms of how often did they sleep together in the same bed, in the same room. And lately, how often were they not sleeping together? And bear in mind, when you're thinking about getting a divorce, part of the message to reinforce that is you don't sleep together. You don't sleep in the same room. You don't sleep together, meaning in the same bed, to communicate your intention broader, right? That is why the sleeping arrangements is another, just a critical part of your true crime analysis that is often very much underestimated. Okay, so because it just shows where your mind is and where your heart is. You know, where you put down your head, that's your home. Okay, so it says here, just trying to find my place. Barry explained that in 2019, his company had been contracted to build a retaining wall at a site in Broomfield, Colorado, 2019. Two of his contractors, Cassidy Cordova and Cody Cox, were tasked with the work. Barry said that the wall was not completed correctly and he lost $30,000 because of it. So there is also an acknowledgement of financial kind of a bugbear. And the question is, was his business actually going well or not? And does that play into the events at all? Does that add to tension and so on? And this $30,000 is a lot of money. you'd want to confirm that that really did happen, or did $30,000 get lost in a different way. Barry could not recall the name of the general contractor for the job, which is quite interesting. So they make a note of that. Barry stated that on Saturday, May 9, 2020, he worked with Morgan Gentile on a job site in Salida. So on May 9, while Suzanne is flirting with Jeff and suntanning, Barry's with quite an attractive woman. I don't know if you guys have seen Morgan Gentile, and I'm not saying or suggesting Barry's having an affair with her. I am saying while his wife is flirting with somebody, Barry is driving around with an attractive young woman. That's all I'm saying. And is Barry resentful that his wife isn't really working and he's working? While that is happening, Barry's driving around with an attractive young woman. The task was to complete a rock beach on the property. That's on May 9th. So he's saying, on that day, I was working on a rock beach on the property. And so if you were the investigator and you're saying, Jeepers, we need to start looking somewhere. So on the one hand, you're going to be saying, okay, well, there's a retaining wall in Broomfield. Well, that's pretty far away, and that had to do with something in 2019. But on this critical day, May 9th, there's this rock beach. Do you get what I'm saying? So someone asked earlier, why did it take so long to figure out, to search the hotel room? Because they didn't really know there were so many possible crime scenes, right? They didn't even know if it was a crime scene, but when they did know, they had to start going through these different places. We know they spent a lot of time at the rock beach. A lot of time and attention was spent. Good night, Dorothy. Good having you here. So because of all these different locations, it's becoming quite complicated. It's like, where do we look, right? So after this job, Barry communicated with Suzanne by text message. They talked about hiking, and she later requested him to purchase hot tub chemicals. Barry stated his last message from Suzanne was between 11 a.m. and noon. It's quite a long gap there. 11 a.m. and noon, that's like an hour. Barry said that at around 2:26 p.m., he texted Suzanne that he was done and was heading home. Now think about those words, I'm done and I'm going home. And Suzanne's text, I'm done, a few days earlier. So the question is this a staged text? Is this text from 2:26 p.m., is it a staged text or not? Did Barry actually arrive home earlier than that? Right? And I think one's got to look at the metadata of the truck to cross-reference to say, what time did Barry likely / definitely arrive back on May 9? I'm not that au fait with the metadata and this case to know that right now, but that is an important question to put down, is what time did Barry arrive home based on the metadata of the truck, when the truck started and stopped? Because we do have that when the doors opened and closed. So that is something to kind of cross-reference there. So a question that does arise is, did Barry arrive home earlier when Suzanne was still messaging and texting? The other thing you can also say is Morgan Gentile is kind of a witness here. What time did Barry leave her? What does she say? And we'll get to that, right? Barry stated that sometime on Saturday, Suzanne asked him to take her mountain bike and helmet out of her vehicle, which he did. That's quite interesting, is that he has himself touching her bike, handling her bike and her helmet. It's not that Suzanne takes it out herself. It's that he has himself in his own story handling her bike. So if you had to say, Barry, we found your fingerprints on her bike. Yeah, well, I took her bike out. She asked me to. Oh, okay. And that's another example of where you can have possible tailoring of a narrative to fit the evidence, right? Possible tailoring. The other thing that I think is a little bit strange here, there could be something, there could possibly be nothing, is this idea of, and I don't know where this text is, and I don't know what the timing is of it, but it says here, they talked about hiking, and then she asked him to purchase hot tub chemicals. Now, it could be a coincidence. In true crime, we don't believe in coincidences. Why on earth is Barry buying chemicals on that day of all days, that time of all times? And you might say, well, the fact that she's asking him to buy it is, it's totally innocent. But that could also be a staged text. In other words, that text could be written by Barry from her phone. In theory, it's becoming a little bit stretchy. It's becoming a little bit like a conspiracy theory, but you've at least got to ask that question in order to exclude it, right? So that we've got to ask the question, is this hot tub chemical purchase relevant? Bear in mind, Suzanne's disappeared. Or is it just a weird coincidence? And that's something the prosecution will need to figure out and make their case for or not. But it is the timing of that definitely stands out, the hot tub chemicals. Barry said that sometime on Saturday, Suzanne asked him to take him out. Okay, I said that. So that's also quite a good point, is that sometime on Saturday, when on Saturday? When on Saturday did he do something with the bike? Can't you be more specific? Was it the morning? Was it the evening? Was it the late evening? Another thing that I think could be worth pointing out is, and Barry's daughters might know this, is, did Suzanne normally leave the vehicle in her bike? Leave the bike in her vehicle? Because I do that. I take my bike here and there in the next place, but I tend to always remove it almost immediately. Why? Because I need to drive around. I need my vehicle for certain things. I also need my bike sometimes for other things. So I don't really have my bike in the vehicle or attached to the vehicle constantly. It is after I've arrived home, I take it off, kind of thing. So would it be normal for Suzanne just to leave her bike in the vehicle? And I would guess it wouldn't be normal. Yeah, that's a really good point from Terry. She says, Suzanne asked him to touch the bike equals Alex saying Helena told him to point the gun at her. It's in the absence of the person who's the victim, you have the victim giving instructions. Oh, I was just a passive player. I didn't, this wasn't my idea. I was the passive person in this, really. Is Alec Baldwin a passive human being? Does he have a passive personality? Does Barry have a passive personality? Stephanie says, I'm one sentence at a time typically. Okay, so P. Willie, just be careful of those comments about narcissism and so on. It's borderline defamatory. If someone's not being diagnosed a certain way and you say, I think you got this disorder, just be careful of making those sort of comments. You've got to almost imagine that Brian's lawyers are listening to this and reading the comments. Just be careful of how you phrase certain things. Something that you think is true, is your opinion, is nevertheless judgment kind of thing, right? Just be careful of what you say. What did I say? Barry's lawyers. Okay, so just keep going. So this is the part that's really important about this whole idea that they had a wonderful night together, they cooked dinner, they had sex. Is that credible? Is that reasonable based on what we're going to find out? So this is near the bottom of page 19. Barry stated that he cooked steaks out on the grill and they never even looked at the clock that night. That's great. And that is in inverted commas in the affidavit. So they've obviously highlighted that to say that is a bit odd. So you didn't have any idea of time that night. Okay, that's interesting and quite convenient. The other thing is, and I just want to say this in a very basic way, Brian is burning something, right? So we know that there was a fire in the hearth. We know that he cooked some sort of he burned some sort of decorative wood, even though there was a massive stockpile of wood. Something I meant to mention in previous analysis, but I never got to do it, is, did I say Brian? Okay, sorry. I'm surprised I didn't say, okay. Anyway, so the fact with the wood is that when you go out the door of the Morphew, there's a massive stockpile of wood all along the one side there. And not only that, there's a big amount of wood inside, and yet Barry apparently burnt a sort of decorative piece of wood. And so what on earth is going on there, right? But the point is that in the middle of these circumstances, there is fire. So you can say he's barbecuing and he's also doing that. Well, and Chris Watts also barbecued in the end game scenario of his family's existence. There was also a big fire in the Patrick Frazee case. I also think there's a possibility that fire plays a role in the Ramsey case. And that's maybe quite an unexplored area, given that duct tape was never found, the original roll of duct tape was never found, that the nylon string that was found on JonBenét's wrists, they didn't find any of that exact kind of nylon elsewhere in the house. Where did it go? Possible that could have been burnt. The other possibilities as well, but you've also got to, in the same way you look at laundry, why is laundry being done in the middle of this? Why are fires being made in the middle of this, right? And so anyway, he says that they never looked at the clock. He cooked steaks on the grill. Often when you're cooking, when you're having a barbecue, you do look at your watch. It's like, well, we need to eat by now, kind of thing. Or someone might say, are the steaks ready? When do I need to put the salad on the table? There is a tendency to be aware of the time and how long it's going to take to get the barbecue ready. That's certainly been my experience. So this also doesn't quite feel 100%. And then he says, it's actually one of the best nights we've had in a while, actually, because there were no chemicals in Suzanne. He said they put their phones aside. So yeah, you've got quite a few things playing out at the same time. They put their phones aside. Does it really make sense that Suzanne and Barry had this great night when what was going on with Jeff was going on with Jeff? Would it really make sense that Chris Watts had a great night with Shanann when his heart was really set on Nicole? It doesn't. People don't really work that way. He doesn't say anything that Suzanne says to him. It talks about things that are happening, but there's no real color or picture or glimpse of anything real that is going on. It's just, well, he's barbecuing and they're not on their phones and that he doesn't look at the clocks. I do think the imagery is quite interesting. He talks about steaks. He talks about cooking steaks. He talks about meat on a fire. He talks about the clock. He talks about putting their phones aside. He talks about chemicals. If you just take that paragraph and you open your imagination to possibility and you say, what is being admitted here is steaks, fire, grill, clock, no chemicals. He says no chemicals in Suzanne. That's a really odd thing to say. There are no chemicals in Suzanne. He doesn't say she didn't have anything to drink or she was feeling healthy or anything like that. He uses the word chemicals. And then there's also the thing about chemicals, buying chemicals for the hot tub. And we know about the chemicals in the hotel room, the chlorine. So that should just put up a red flag where you say, are chemicals relevant to this? This is a scenario where somebody has disappeared, no remains, very little evidence. Are chemicals relevant? And I think where you can start to say, I think we need to pay attention to this is where you say, are there chemicals in tranquilizer darts? And then next to that, you say, if someone did the washing, they would also use chemicals. You put washing powder in. The whole idea is that you are using chemical agents to clean, to destroy, to control certain circumstances. And so the question you're kind of being asked is the murder weapon and is some of the psychology in the case, and again, we don't know if it was definitely murder, but if it was, is the psychology in this particular crime very chemically orientated, right? So yes, Pooh's Blustery Day says it is strange, and so yeah, to say she had no chemicals in her is a very oddly it invokes this idea of the corporeal, the structure of the human body, and then are there chemicals in it? It invokes that visual of the body as almost like a series of membranes, and are there chemicals going through it or not? It's a very graphic, sort of dehumanized way of looking at a person. They're not chemicals in that person. You tend to think about that in terms of an autopsy or the analysis of blood. You wouldn't tend to think of that as how you would refer to somebody you love. You'd say, well, I don't think they took any medication, or I don't think she had a drink. You'd think of it in human terms, not in medical terms, not in that dissociated way. That's just how I interpret that. So we do need to think about this hot tub chemicals, him saying there were no chemicals in Suzanne, and then also the chemicals in the hotel room. What were those chemicals in the hotel room for? Then he said they put their phones aside. Both of them, they put their phones aside. Barry explained that on Saturday evening they had dinner together, had sexual intercourse, and he went to bed. So now, if they had dinner together, where was her plate? Why was there only one plate? If they had sexual intercourse, is there any evidence of that? Did they have sexual intercourse in bed, or what's kind of going on? I guess you could argue that sexual intercourse then put a load of washing in, and that's why you wouldn't see it. Anyway, Barry could not specify a time. That's interesting. But believed it was around or after 8 p.m. So you're saying, I don't know when all of this happened, but I think it was at about 8 o'clock. And so that's really where you want to start checking. You want to say, okay, he's at least anchored the maybe of it all to 8 o'clock. Does that make sense? Barry stated neither he nor Suzanne left the residence again. Right? That's quite important. So he never went outside. They kind of had quite an early night, if you think about it. Also bear in mind, he's kind of saying here that they went to bed quite early at 8 o'clock in the evening. That's quite early for a Saturday night to be done with the day, going to bed, 8 o'clock. Remember earlier on he said they normally go to bed at around 9. So he's kind of acknowledging that it was a fairly early night, isn't he? Barry said that he was scheduled to travel to Broomfield on May 10, 2020, the next day, to get eyes on the site and fully determine what was needed. So that is, again, would you normally do that, Barry? Would you normally go somewhere in a work-related capacity on the Sunday? The other thing to think about, just in a normal way, is to say, couldn't or shouldn't Barry have done that on the Saturday? I mean, he arrived home 2:30 in the afternoon. Couldn't he have gone to Broomfield? He's working Saturday anyway. Couldn't he have gone to Broomfield on Saturday so he could be with his wife on Mother's Day on Sunday? And so, in a weird way, he's acknowledging that he doesn't really need to be with his wife, isn't he? So I'm asking you, in terms of his own activities, his own movements, his own version of events, he's not really hanging out much with his wife at all, except just before she disappears. Then they have this perfect time together. Barry said that Morgan was supposed to travel to Broomfield that evening, and Cassidy was due to arrive Monday morning. I don't know whether that evening means Sunday evening, but I guess it does. So I think you have two other women who are going to be there. So in a scenario where Suzanne disappears, Barry's going to a hotel in Broomfield and he's going to be meeting with two female co-workers. Barry said that he preloaded his truck on Saturday night, also quite interesting. So it's quite interesting that he says he never left the residence, but he is nevertheless leaving the house to, after, I guess he's had, I don't know if this was before he had sex or after, to preload his truck. So did he preload his truck at the same time that he unloaded the bicycle? When did the bicycle happen? It's quite an interesting question. Barry explained he set his alarm for 4:30 in the morning on Sunday, May 10. And so this is quite interesting. The footnote here is Barry changed his statement to CBI in 2020 and to the FBI in 2021. So he's changed his statements to two different sets of law enforcement agencies, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Federal Bureau of Investigation, in 2021, multiple times about the alarm to match the evidence. So it's quite a simple thing. Barry, when did you set your alarm? Oh, I set it at 4:30. Oh, no, I set it at 4. No, sorry, when did you set your alarm? 5 o'clock. Why is that a big mystery? Why is when you set your alarm on a Sunday such a big inconsistency? Why can't it just be 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock? And with the Chris Watts case, you also have that inconsistency where, and ironically, it's also 5 going back to 4. That, oh, no, I need a bit more time. So, okay, we're going to make it this time now. And I think why there may be some trouble with that time is Barry didn't normally do anything on a Sunday. So in this scenario, he can't even, and I'm speculating, I don't think he can apply a sort of logic to events that they would normally play out on a Sunday because was this a normal Sunday? I don't know. Now we go into page 20. How many pages am I still going to do? I wanted to do 20 up to page 25. There's no way I'm going to get there. I think we're going to stop at, well, maybe we can go a little bit longer. See, there's still almost 150 people in chat. Okay, let's just have a look at some of your comments here. Laundry is always a dead giveaway. Cassidy is a female. I actually don't know. I think it's possible that Cassidy is a male, if you're putting it that way. Cassidy Cordova is a male. Okay, there we go. I'm not as familiar with this case as I normally am at this stage of a case, I've got to say. But that's also why we're going to the affidavit. Donna says, good night, too late for me. Love seeing you though. Thanks for joining us, Donna. Carol says, my husband is 42 years and I don't share a plate. How are you going to share a plate with two steaks and sides? Good point. Okay. Sorry, I just assumed Cassidy is, but yeah, good point with that. The other crew person was Jeff Puckett. So anyway, the point is he was going to see his wife was disappearing, and in the context of that, he was going to a hotel, and Morgan was going to be there. This young woman. Why would Barry need to avoid spending Mother's Day with Suzanne? I don't think he was trying to do that. I don't think he said, I don't want to spend Mother's Day with her. It could be a scenario where if Barry was seeing someone, then if he was required to spend Mother's Day, someone else would be like, oh, so you're not leaving your wife, or oh, so you still have feelings for your wife, or whatever. But I mean, it seems like they weren't doing that anyway, so I don't know if that's really kind of in play. Ellie Cattails, no, you were right about that. Thanks for setting me straight. But it's a great question, Mel. It's a great question to ask that. Okay. The girls were camping in Idaho. They're actually quite a long way away. Okay, so let's keep going. We're now on page 20. I really want to read through this statement to the end. So give me about 2-3 minutes just to read this full page 20. Barry stated he awoke to his alarm at 4:30 a.m. Barry explained that when he awoke, Suzanne was still asleep in the master bed. Barry stated he heard her snoring. Barry said he showered and left the house at about 5 a.m. Barry stated he last saw Suzanne wearing short white shorts and a white string-type shirt. Barry stated that he traveled on Highway 50 to Highway 285. He traveled Highway 285 to East 470 North to I-76 and then on to US 36, I guess Highway 36. Barry stated that he went directly to the Holiday Inn and checked in. Barry said he went into the room for a short period of time and rested after the drive. Barry explained he then went over to the work site. After looking at the site, Barry called Morgan and requested her to bring another person. So that's one of the first things he does after all of this, is he calls Morgan. There's also a footnote here, footnote number 27. It says, Barry changed his last sighting of Suzanne through 2020 and 2021 numerous times. Then just a precursor to what we're going to deal with, it says 27, all of the statements in this paragraph are later proven false. 28, on April 22, 2021, FBI agents showed Barry surveillance photos of him in his hotel room, not the job site, when Jean Ritter called him at 5 p.m. 29, throughout his interviews, Barry moved from referring to a perfect marriage and a perfect Friday night to admitting he fought with Suzanne often. So 20 pages into the affidavit and you're getting this build-up of problems that are coming through, inconsistencies, right? And the thing I want to kind of emphasize here is, in a scenario, a good comparison to what I'm talking about is the Chris Watts case. If you imagine that Chris Watts was doing terrible things, that he was doing bad deeds, that he was up to nefarious foul deeds at night, and by that I basically mean between basically 11 p.m. till 5 a.m. So for 6 hours when he should have been sleeping, when he said he was sleeping, was he sleeping? If he wasn't sleeping, what does that mean? I mean, besides what he was actually doing, it means simply that he wasn't sleeping. which means he's going to be very, very tired. He's going to work, and now he's got the police talking to him, and eventually that fatigue is going to take a toll, right? Do you follow what I'm saying? By the same token, if Barry wasn't sleeping from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4:30 the next morning, which is really 8.5 hours, if Barry wasn't sleeping during that time, but he was doing something else, Tapo, have a good night. Hope we see you again. So if Barry wasn't sleeping from 8 o'clock on May 9 to 4:30 in the morning on May 10, then he's not going to, he would have had not a lot of sleep just by, right? So let me just ask the question here, and just keep your answers to yes or no. Do you think Barry got enough sleep? Let's put it another way. Do you think Barry got far too little sleep on the night in question, on the night of May 9, going into the morning of May 10th? Do you think Barry got far too little sleep? Just yes or no. Flower Child says he's a hunter. He can stay awake for hours on end. So that's your opinion. Carline says yes. Stephanie, yes. Flower Child says no. I think he had enough sleep, or it wasn't a factor. Ali Cattell says I don't know. Anne says yes. Let's see a couple more. Yes or no? Do you think he had enough sleep? Yeah, Marianne, I think she did have cancer twice. She had, yeah. Hi, Farmer. Any more answers? Any more? Do you think Barry had enough sleep on May 9? Carol, as far as I understand, the daughters were going to be back on Mother's Day night. So Cessna says too little, if any at all. Carol says not enough sleep. Anne says didn't have enough sleep. So if you take, and it's just a hypothesis, right? If you say, because we don't know, maybe he did sleep. If he didn't sleep, then you say, okay, so then what? And so something that you might want to factor into this, which is maybe quite useful, is where would he then have caught up with sleep? If he was tired and sleepy and he hadn't slept enough, where could he have gotten that sleep? Where, what could have happened? And isn't the answer that's why he needed the hotel room in Broomfield? That's what he may have used the hotel room for. Not just saying that he only used it to sleep, but part of what he did was sleep. So he may have done all sorts of things. He may have looked at insurance papers. He may have showered. He may have done this and that. But didn't he also sleep at the hotel? And did he sleep for 10 minutes? Did he sleep for half an hour? Did he sleep for 1 hour? Did he sleep for 3 hours? Right? Meaning, did he need to catch up on a lot of sleep then, that day, May 10th, because he'd lost a big chunk of sleep just before that? So that's just something to bear in mind, is you don't need to know all the evidence. You don't need to know like all these little details. You can ask a very simple question and say, what was Barry doing in that hotel room? And what time did he go in? And this would be on surveillance video. What time did he go in and what time did he come out? And his story is that he went to Broomfield to work. So great. There we go. Thanks, Barry. So Barry, did you work? And so if you have a scenario where he goes into a hotel room, but he stays there for 5 or 6 hours, it's like, why are you not working? You went there to work, so why are you not working? If you're not working, what are you doing? And you can understand him being in the hotel room for an hour or something, but he says he went there to rest. But if he's there for hours and hours, then he's not resting, he's sleeping. Well, why do you need to sleep? Why did you need to get up so early to go to a hotel room to sleep? That's quite an important question to ask, is why would you go so early from your home to a hotel only to sleep and rest? And how long did you sleep and rest? So why did you need to get up early in the first place? Why couldn't you have gone there at 6 or 8 or 10, right? If you were only going to go there to do nothing. So what were you doing in that hotel room? How long were you supposed to be working? You know, if it was such a big job that you'd leave so early, what did you do with the time that's why you left so early? It was to go and do your job. Well, did you do it? Did you do it? I mean, you're just using the guy's own story to say, okay, well, it's your story. Does your story make sense given what you actually did? So you're saying you're doing this. Did you do it? So if you didn't commit this crime, instead you did exactly what you said you did, well, does it actually make sense? Did you actually do what you said you did instead of what could have happened? And that needs to make sense as well. Okay, so do you guys see that? Okay, so let's go on. Barry said that he was at the job site at 10 o'clock-ish, right? So he leaves Salida at around 4:30, gets to the hotel. I think it's a 3-hour drive, so gets there at about 8. And so he says he's at the job site at about 10 o'clock-ish. And he says it was just hotel and job back and forth. It's quite interesting. Hotel and job back and forth. The way he says that. If you think about the fact that we know that he was doing these garbage runs, it was like hotel and job back and forth. That is exactly what he was doing. But it wasn't necessarily job. He said he was cleaning out his truck. Barry says he drove to a would you want to be cleaning out your truck at the same time that you're working on construction? You know, would that be like your priority, or would you be either clean your truck before you do anything or after you've done everything? Barry said that he drove to McDonald's near the job site and cleaned his windshield. Oh, so that's why he went to the McDonald's, to clean his windshield. Okay. He then went back to the hotel room. He stayed in the room for about 1 hour and possibly watched television. Barry then returned to the job site. So there you're getting a kind of an explanation for why he was so in the hotel room for such a long time. You were watching television. But he's saying, I was only in the hotel room for an hour. So was he? Was he in the hotel room for just an hour? Barry stated in response to the question if he ate that day. It's also a very important thing. We also have it with Chris Watts. If you're so busy running around in the dark, you're probably not eating. You're not going to be eating in the middle of all of this. So why not? Why aren't you eating? Right? So that is a really important aspect with the Chris Watts case. It's also quite an important aspect with John Benet Ramsey and so on. When do you eat? And what does that say about things like time of death? So anyway, he says, in response to the question, if he ate that day, I kind of looked for something to eat. Oh, okay. He said that he always keeps granola bars in his truck. He said, I saw McDonald's pulled in there. I don't like crap food, so I thought I'm not going to eat this. So he kind of is saying, I was hungry or I needed to eat. I went to the McDonald's, but then I decided I'm not going to go there to eat. It's a little bit of a strange explanation. Imagine someone says to you, were you hungry? And you say, yes, I was. Oh, so I went to this fast food place, but then I decided it wasn't good, so I didn't go there. Okay, but then where did you eat? It's a bit of a strange way of answering the question. You could just say, I had granola bars. What's the McDonald's got to do with it? Of course, we know for a fact that he went to McDonald's and he did a trash run there. He doesn't mention that though here. He doesn't say, oh, by the way, while I was there, I threw out some trash bags. Oh, okay. We'll find that out a bit later though. While on the job site, Barry explained that his neighbor, Jean Ritter, called him and explained that someone still could not reach Suzanne. This is, I think, well, that's redacted. So that is how he finds out. And he says where he is at the job site. So this is quite important to bear in mind. You should remember this. Barry finds out that Suzanne's missing when he's at the job site, not in the hotel. And then, is that true? Where is Barry really when he finds out Suzanne's missing? When he finds out Suzanne's missing? So, and then what does he do? And this is really fascinating. And this is where the affidavit really gets kind of going in a way. Jean, who has the access codes for the house, asked to go check the house. That's quite interesting as well. Jean asked to go check the house. Barry seems like he didn't ask her. Jean discovered Suzanne's car was there, but her mountain bike was not. I wonder how that came up. Did Jean say, hey, I see that her mountain bike's not here? Or did Barry say, Jean, do you see a mountain bike there? Oh, is it not there? You know, how did that come about? Did she realize of her own that it wasn't there? Barry said that he texted Suzanne Happy Mother's Day earlier, as did their daughters. Barry said his daughters had not received any replies from Suzanne. Also, Barry said there was no cellular phone service at the house unless the phone is on the Usenet Wi-Fi internet service. Barry said, I was at the job site when Jean called me. And that's in inverted commas. That's obviously very important, which is why they've highlighted it in quotes. He said Jean called at around 5 p.m. Barry left the job site and drove to the hotel where he dropped the tools off in the lobby. Wow. I'm seeing a very big red flag right here. I don't know whether you guys see it. He then drove directly back to Salida. Do you guys see what I'm getting at? Wasn't Barry zigzagging around the house? Okay, well, I think we need to stick with Yvonne Phillips says, I always clean my windshield at McDonald's, ... So the point I'm trying to get to here, well, Timmy, I think Timmy wants to go outside. Timmy, come. Timmy, come, boy. Timmy doesn't want his time in the sun right now. He wants to go out, I think, for a whips. Okay, so what I'm getting at is it's a similar scenario, I think, to Don Wells, is somebody calls you and says your wife's missing and it's late already in the day and you're far from there, right? It's not like you're just around the corner. It's going to take you a long time to get back. Your wife's missing, and the first thing you do is drive to the hotel and do something with your tools. Why can't you just drive home? Why didn't Don Wells, the first thing he did was something to do with tools. Chris Watts also spoke about when he was in the garage, he loaded tools into his truck when he was actually loading something else. Just read what Carol says. I believe dropped off the tools, brought them in the hotel, saying he needed to leave them there for the workers was in fact likely. Okay, so I think the tools is something else. I think the tools is, can you see me at the hotel working, kind of thing? Can you see me walking through the lobby with tools, right? But to me, it doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you just drive straight, I mean, it's kind of an emergency. You know, my wife's missing. It's quite late in the day already. It's Mother's Day and I haven't heard from her. Just drive home. Why are you going to waste time dropping tools off? You've got them in the truck anyway, right? So, anyway, that is what he does. But the question I've also kind of got is that really where he hears from Jean? Is he really at the job site or is he actually at the hotel? And then you've got to ask this question. If you get a phone call in the hotel, Suzanne's missing, then shouldn't you leave the hotel? Just like, okay, I got the call, leave the hotel and go, right? I'm just asking you that question and we're going to deal with it in Affidavit as we go through these different versions. If that is the case, if you're at the hotel, oh yes, the cat's just stuck her paw. Maybe I'll show you the cat if she comes around this side. She's just on the other side of my screen. It's funny, my dog doesn't want to say hello, but the cat does. Ivy, come. She's playing with a plant. Okay. Hey. Sorry, there's a plant on the other side and she's going to throw it out of its pot. Pooh's blustery day, treats for Timmy. Thanks for that. Timmy's actually chewing on a hot water bottle. Shall I show you? There he is, being a bad dog. Bad dog. Naughty. Can you see him? Naughty Woofy. Okay. Where's the cat? I can't actually see the cat right now. So anyway, if she comes around, I'll show it to you. Old woman, it's quite a funny name. I would say, what do you mean missing? And ask questions and try to call her myself before rushing home. That's the other thing is, shouldn't you call home very quickly as well? Okay, so she's missing. Okay, I'm going to phone immediately. Where are you? Right? Timmy's brows. Yeah, I've also got a little bit of Timmy's brows myself. Okay, so I just want you to put that thought in the back pocket is, where's Barry when he gets this call? And also, what does he do once he gets this call? And is it significant to this whole tapestry of weirdness that's starting to come about to some extent? You know, does this make sense? Is it reasonable? If you got a message like that, would you just stay in the hotel for another hour? You know, what's kind of going on here, right? So, Barry says, I was at the job site when Jean called me. He said that she called around 5 p.m. Barry said he left the job site, drove to the hotel, dropped off the tools in the lobby. Why are you dropping the tools off in the lobby and not in the hotel room? Why on earth would you drop the tools in the lobby? Right? Like, aren't you taking the tools to the hotel to sort of leave them in the hotel, but sort of safe, in like a safe place? You're not going to leave them at the job site. Now, why on earth would you leave them in the lobby? And he might say, well, I was in a hurry. Well, did he come in a hurry? Was he like running? Did he tell anyone he was leaving the tools in? Did he sort of run out or did he walk out? And how long did it take him to get back? So you just want to have his story hold up. But in terms of all of this, he then drove directly back to Salida. Now, it says here, on April 22, agents showed Barry surveillance photos of him in his hotel room, not the job site, when Jean Ritter called him at 5 p.m. Let me read that again. This is like a year later, right? Almost a full year later. So all of this happened May 9, 10, 2020. On April 22nd, 2021, FBI agents showed Barry surveillance photos of him inside his hotel room, in his hotel room, not at the job site, when Jean Ritter called him at 5 p.m. So why do you say you're at the job site? Why do you say you're at the job site when you got this call? And so a really important question is, when did he leave the hotel? How long after he got that call did he leave the hotel? And I think you've kind of got to ask the question, if Barry knows more than he's saying, if Barry was somehow involved, then you could ask, why would he not want to be there? Why would he want to be there sort of later? Like, why would he not want to be there, say, at 6 or 7 o'clock? Why would he? Just think about it like this. Why would you prefer to be back in Salida later in the day, night, than earlier? Like why wouldn't you want to be there earlier? Let me just ask you that. Like, if Barry has something to do with this, and he's thinking, I don't want to like go back right now. I'll go back in an hour. I'll leave in an hour. I'll do whatever. I mean, you've got to remember him telling the cops he got the call when he was at the job site. Then he went to the hotel with the tools. Then he drove straight to Salida. That's kind of like accounting for him not driving straight to Salida, right? So that's the story. But the question is, why, if Barry is involved, but let's just say if somebody is involved in this, why wouldn't you want to not go like straight home? You could even apply the same thing to Chris Watts. Why did Chris Watts take quite a long time to get from Survey 319 back home, right? So let's just see what you guys say. Jean says, that's quite a good one. I actually didn't think of that. After dark, so scratches aren't as obvious. That's quite a good, but bear in mind he was wearing I think a long sleeve plaid shirt. Heather says, trying to create more time in the timeline. Anne says, did someone not want Suzanne to get to her May 11 doctor's appointment? Carol says, what took him forever to get home? Heather says, Chris didn't remember to stop at the dumpsters first. Chris actually did stop at a dumpster first. In Black Mesa Road, just around the corner from Saratoga. Iris says he left the hotel room in a disheveled state, like he left in a hurry. So one wonders, was Barry sleeping when this phone call came? Was he watching TV? What was he actually doing? One just wonders what is actually going on. So I'm going to give you my idea of why I think why I think it's just normal to assume in a scenario where someone is legitimately a suspect. So let's say it's not Barry, let's just say it's somebody else. Let's say it's a guy called Fred. Fred's at the hotel in Broomfield. He gets this call, but Fred is guilty. Fred did commit this crime. Fred gets this call from the neighbors saying, oh no, your wife's missing. We need you to come out here and help find her, whatever. Why would Fred not want to go there immediately? I think there's quite a simple and obvious reason for that, is the sooner you go there, the sooner someone is going to be like asking you questions and where were you, and there's like more opportunity for to be interrogated really by everybody, by the neighbor, but also there is this scenario of, as it's getting darker, you're not going to be able to see certain things that are potentially there, such as who knows, marks on clothing or whatever it could be. So there could be something in the house. There could be smells, right? So the more time you've got the more you can, right? But the other side of it is the later you go, you must bear in mind for a normal person, it's like, oh, Suzanne's missing, let's go and look for her. And then it's like, well, now it's 10 o'clock, well, we'll carry on with this tomorrow. So the later you can delay it, the better the chance that window where you're going to be questioned, and that window where you're going to kind of have a confrontation and a kind of a mini investigation. So in other words, the investigation is going to be limited to arriving there quite late at night, speaking to people. Okay, well, it's late now, we'll go home, we'll carry on tomorrow. In other words, you want to make it as late as possible so that the actual opportunity to be spoken to is as little as possible. And if you think about Barry arriving, he's like the last to arrive. There's one of the Morphew daughter's boyfriends there. There's sort of the neighbors there. There are all these other people there. Barry's like the last to arrive, and he's like, could it have been a mountain lion? What's going on? And it is quite late at night already. And you've kind of got a scenario where the officers are walking around with flashlights because it's dark. And that makes it a scenario of they don't have much time to do what they're doing, but they also can't see very clearly what is happening. And think about a scenario like a fire was made and something was burned. The smell, but also that the sight of some of the things that didn't burn are going to be harder to see at night than in the day. Does that make sense? Now, in the converse, in a genuine emergency, you would have it the opposite. You'd be trying to get home as fast as possible because you want to, and you would get home at kind of as early as possible. But on the other hand, you probably wouldn't have been away from home to begin with. There's quite an interesting analogy to everything I'm saying with the Scott Peterson case, where you also had Scott Peterson calling Lacey's mother, or having a phone call with Lacey's mother, and then Lacey's mother telling her husband, and her husband calling 911, and all of this played out, I think, about the same time. I don't know if it was 6 or 8 o'clock in the evening, but it was towards the evening. And so the search for Lacey sort of starts, and this is, bear in mind, this is December, so in winter, it starts very late in the day. And doesn't that suit Scott? The fact that we're going to start searching for her in the park. By now, all the cleaning smells are taken care of. By now, people are tired, and it's long time after the events, and they're not going to be able to search the whole day from the morning. They've only got a few hours before it's time for my bedtime, kind of thing. The cover of night. Okay, so where are we now? So Barry initially said there were no issues with their marriage. Later in the interview, when asked, Barry disclosed they did fight. Barry explained that Suzanne had battled through stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma several times in her life. I think it should really be twice, but maybe it's more than that. The most recent battle started late last year, 2019. Suzanne was receiving maintenance treatments at the cancer center in Salida. Now, one wonders, and you have a possible similar scenario with Chris Watts. Chris Watts was in an unhappy marriage with Shanann. Shanann had lupus. Shanann was talking about mortal danger to her daughter with nuts, and there was this constant thing of being ill and sickness, and he kept talking about the medical bills to his colleagues. But this repeated thing of ill health and vulnerable physical constitution, did that lead to him thinking, wow, I just wish you would die? You are sick constantly, you are burdened on me financially because of the medical side of things. Stephanie's leaving. Wow, that's too bad. So it's already very late where you are. Stephanie says, good night. Good night, chat. I have to be up with my kids. I will watch the ending tomorrow. Is Jean still with us? Jean, how long are you still going to be with us? Okay, so anyway, the point I'm just trying to make is comparing Shanann and her lupus, thanks a lot, Jean, to Suzanne with her cancer, and just, is this putting a seed into someone's mind where on the one hand you frustrated that they're sick all the time, you are resentful that they're sick all the time, it's a financial burden, it's a killjoy, but then it also becomes like almost wishful thinking. Now that you're sick, it's cool, you're out the way, I can have my fun and play. Now that you're sick, I'm actually enjoying you not having you around, and then that leads to, I wish you would die. Oh, but the sickness isn't taking you away. Well, I'm going to have to do it. I'm asking whether the sickness leads to this almost attempts you into that area of thinking about death, thinking about the destruction of the body, thinking about someone being vulnerable. Bear in mind, Shanann had that scar to her neck and that operation around her neck. Does that lead to almost an involuntary thought of, well, this person around me is very weak? Do you know what I'm saying? Does that start that criminal seed from germinating, right? It's just something to think about, that's all. So Barry said that Suzanne started using redacted and alcohol. I'm not sure if it's antidepressants, but anyway, he says Barry said that Suzanne started using something and alcohol. Barry said this drug and alcohol use would sometimes lead to arguments during which Suzanne would accuse him of being controlling. So it's almost like he's saying Suzanne was irrational when she took substances, and he's almost like saying that, almost putting the blame on her for issues in their marriage is due to substance abuse. Barry describes Suzanne's demeanor as hateful. Wow, that's pretty interesting. So in other words, when she's intoxicated, she was hateful. Barry said that his last argument was Friday morning. He denied any physical abuse or altercations between Suzanne and him. It is quite interesting that he said that an argument Friday morning, and then they had a perfect evening the next night. Whoa, my voice is definitely going. Okay, so we're at the bottom of page 20. I'm going to try and go for another 15 minutes, see if I can. Is it okay with you, Timmy? Timmy's like waiting for me. Is it okay, Timmy? Can I go another 15 minutes? Is that okay? Okay. Page 21. Other statements by Barry in this May 13, 2020 interview. Just look at your comments. Is Timmy okay? Timmy, is it okay? That's a very good point from Carol. Carol says, very, very good point. He contradicts himself by saying on Saturday they had a great evening because there were no chemicals on board, but that's the day he said she had drunk eyes, I think, in her picture, the picture that she sent to Jeff. That's quite a good point. I love the critical thinking there. Well done, Carol. P. Willie's seeing similarities or intertextualities in the Lori hacking case in Utah. Misa Mom says, thank you for the stimulating discussion. I'm staying till the end. Okay. Yeah. Once the water starts, we worry about your voice. I've only got half a glass, so 15 minutes, hopefully we can get there. I just want to try and do 2 more pages. Let's see if we can. These statements with Barry are really interesting. So other statements by Barry in the same May 13 interview include the following. Barry said, quote, I just know that there's nothing in my truck. There's nothing in my house. I know that for a fact, unless somebody came there Sunday morning after I left. That's all. I'm being honest with you. They can be there for 10 weeks. They'll never find a single thing. But, end quote. That reminds me a little bit of Chris Watts' sermon on the porch, like where he says, all the police are moving through the home and their cadaver dogs, and he talks about he came home and there was nothing. And then he explains what he means by nothing. I think he's thinking there's no evidence, but he's actually saying, I think he means they found no evidence, but it can also mean there was nothing in the sense that nobody was there. And then he explains it in the Sermon on the Porch saying, nobody was there, everyone was gone, right? So it seems like he's saying something similar. There's nothing in my house. He should be saying Suzanne's not at home or something like that, but he's kind of saying there's no evidence in my truck, there's no evidence in my house. He seems to be thinking pretty far ahead. He says, unless somebody came there Sunday morning after I left, now he's making a scenario where somebody else could have come there to the house and taken Suzanne, right? And Chris Watts said the same thing. Maybe someone came through the garage or something. Anyway, Barry interjected Cody Cox as a suspect that Cox allegedly threatened to kill Barry. So that's quite interesting. It's quite a weird word, but it sounds like Barry sort of interrupted or just volunteered, check out Cody Cox, he could be your man kind of thing. Barry consistently throughout the interview questioned why he had not been cleared in the investigation. I think that's quite interesting. You don't have Chris Watts saying, why are you still talking to me? It's quite interesting that Barry is quite assertive, like, why are you guys talking to me? I should be cleared by now, right? Barry initially identified the Cushman's cleaning lady's daughter and boyfriend as possible suspicious person. So he's identifying quite a few suspects, it seems to be. Interestingly, it's the cleaning lady's daughter and boyfriend. So it seems like he's saying, and I presume it's the cleaning lady for the Puma Path home, that the cleaning lady could be responsible, which would suggest, wouldn't the cleaning lady be cleaning things? And did the cleaning lady clean certain things on her way out? Barry stated, because if somebody went in and did something and took her and then ditched her bike to make it look like something, then I want you guys to find that evidence. However, he states multiple times, there's nothing in the house, nothing in my truck. And so one must wonder, if he keeps saying there's nothing in the house, there's nothing in my truck, is there something in the house? Was there something in his truck? Barry said, and she would get so angry sometimes and even hateful, which is not her. Barry stated during these arguments that Suzanne has stated, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to divorce you. And she doesn't mean it. I know she doesn't mean it, but in that state of mind. So he's kind of admitting something, but he's also minimizing it. He's saying only when she's drunk does she say these things, but she doesn't really mean it, which I think is a weird, it's a weird kind of metaphor. So Barry's using a kind of a metaphor for actual argument, saying she did argue, but whenever she was arguing, she was kind of intoxicated or under the influence of something, and so it wasn't really real. and it's quite a interesting way of dismissing her humanity, that because she was really arguing with him, but I don't think she was intoxicated, right? It's quite a weird way of minimizing a whole person and that whole dimension, just saying, no, well, she was just drunk. Interestingly, Patrick Frazee did something similar. Patrick Frazee also accused his fiancée of being drinking and having depression and other things like that. When asked about working on Sunday, he said, it's Mother's Day. It's not like it's husband's day. Quite interesting, that perspective. He doesn't say anything about it being Sunday. I think it would have been good if the authorities could say, yeah, but why are you working on like God's, on the day of rest, right? Devaluing. Why are you working on the day of rest? Aren't you a strong Christian? And if you had such a perfect night with Suzanne, why would you leave her first thing the next day and be out the entire day? He also said that at the worksite, he stayed at the worksite with a quote, I think I was there until about 6 o'clock. So the call with Jean Ritter, the neighbor, happened at 5. This is already suggesting that he didn't leave until an hour later. That's quite interesting, that an hour after this basically emergency call, and bear in mind, 911 was called. So you're going to call the cops, but you're not going to call yourself to the scene, if you know what I'm saying. In other words, the authorities are going to be called, the police are going to be called, but you're going to spend an hour twiddling your thumbs before you go home. Why? In regards to the calls to Jean Ritter, he said, she calls me and says, hey, her car is here. And I said, oh, there we have it. That is exactly what I was asking. Is her bike here? So he puts it into play. Is her bike there? It isn't that Jean looks around and realizes her bike's not there. He puts it into play. That's very, very interesting. She goes, where does she keep the bike? And I said, well, I pulled out her car. It should be right near the car. And that's quite interesting. He also acknowledges that he has been driving her car, so his fingerprints are also going to be in her car. She says there's no bike here. And then I think he said, well, look here in the back. And I said, well, she's riding her bike, but I'm a little concerned because I think she said she was going to take a morning ride. So that's quite interesting, is seems to be setting up a narrative, where he seems to be communicating that, in his opinion, Suzanne went riding that morning, which means she's been gone a long time, which means if she's run away or someone's taken her, then it happened in the morning and she's long gone and you're not going to find her. And you're not going to find her. Okay, Timmy? I'll take you out just now, okay? Take you out just now. Okay, so let's just keep going a little bit. So I find that very interesting, that Barry is the one who's not even at home and asks where her bike is. And he's also assuming that it was a morning ride. In regards to inspecting the clothing, Barry said, yeah, she doesn't ride without a helmet, and she has a light blue helmet. Her favorite biking outfit is blue. I haven't been to the house to see if it's there or not, but if the detectives, if you guys didn't find it, then that's probably what she was wearing. Was the blue one missing? Light blue helmet, light blue outfit. She's a matcher, light blue shirt, but was that in her closet? Did you guys find it? So just reading it, Barry seems quite specific and quite nervous, and quite, just the way he says this is quite odd in a way. If you think about it, it never came up with Chris Watts. The clothing really that she was wearing when she arrived home, that is actually something I think, was missing from the questions that were asked about Shanann. It only came out later what shirt she was wearing and what shirt she was found in. But here you have Barry really specific on what she was wearing when she must have left. And ultimately, they actually found her cycling shorts in the house. Regarding the bedding, Barry said that he observed sheets in the dryer. He said, was her whole bed something, because I wasn't in something's room, was the whole bedding off? So you have a similar situation again to the Watts case. The bedding is removed. In this case, the bedding is actually kind of washed. Why do you think that is? Do you think the bedding is a distraction, or do you think something happened in the bed or somewhere in between those two? Barry was asked to voluntarily submit to a polygraph examination, which he declined, and he said he would think about, and he said he didn't want to do anything that wasn't 100% accurate. He also said that they weren't admissible in court. That's quite interesting. So as far as I can tell, this came up on the 13th of May, right? So 3 days after the incident, Barry's actually asked, will you take a lie detector test? And bear in mind, I don't think in the Chris Watts case, Nicole Kessinger didn't take a lie detector test. Nicole Atkinson, I don't think, took a lie detector test. The only one who did, I think, was Chris Watts, and it could have been another guy. But as far as Trent Bolt, but as far as I know, it was only Chris Watts. You tend to ask someone who you think is a suspect to take a lie detector test. So based on this statement, the police weren't convinced. If you were the police, and based on reading the statement, are you convinced by, I'm not saying you must say Barry is guilty. I'm just saying, would this statement give you a heck of a lot of confidence in his version of events, right? Yes, it was Barry who watched crime shows. It is Barry who watched true crime shows. So one of those true crime shows that he watched also involved, what do you call it? Someone's bicycle being left behind and them disappearing. I think the bicycle was, I'm not sure if it was staged or if there was an abduction related to a bicycle. Heather says lots of red lights for police. Well, they thought so. So anyway, they ask him for a polygraph and he says, no, I'm not going to do it. He says, in a weird way, he says, I don't want to do something that's not going to be 100% accurate. That's kind of like, what does he mean? Does he mean he's not going to be accurate? Or does he mean the test isn't going to be accurate? He doesn't think the test is going to be reliable. And then he says he doesn't want to do something that's not going to be admissible in court. It's quite interesting. He's already thinking about court. We're now at that point, almost 2 years after the fact. But it is very interesting. Did Barry ever say that he took a lie detector test? I don't know whether he did take one subsequent to this, but didn't Barry ever say he was asked? Maybe he just said, I was asked to do a lie detector. But anyway, that's something else. Agent Cale observed scratches on Barry's left upper arm. Barry said, yeah, like that from a tree. And he says, when we were hiking in the mountains. So that, I don't know, definitely makes you think, definitely makes me think. I don't know if I should reveal too much what I think about that, but if he's asked about scratches and if those scratches are from Suzanne, right? He could say that, he could say anything. He could say that, I'm just saying, if he was scratched by Suzanne, if he did do something to Suzanne and he got those scratches while they were in some kind of tussle, right? And now he's got to come up with a different story. He could have said something about, yeah, I scratched myself doing construction. Scott Peterson also had scratches on his hands, I think from the chicken mesh that he used to wrap Lacey in prior to dumping her overboard. And that's easily how you can scratch yourself on those wires, right? And, twisting them with a... So with Barry, the fact that he thinks about a tree and hiking in the mountains, to me, is very interesting. It's picturesque language. It's also locating you in terms of scratches and mountains, and he mentions a tree. And I actually believe trees play a much bigger role in this than a lot of people realize, because of the work that was done in farming with trees and what is associated with farming with trees. So it remains to be seen whether that particular statement has broader significance, but I certainly have my little hairs rising on the back of my neck seeing that. Then this is the bottom of page 21. We're going to do one more page and then that'll be it. Footnote is at 36, or footnote 30 is, these injuries appear to be healing several days old scratches. So bear in mind, this interview is conducted on the 13th of May. So it's possible the scratches were 3 or 4 days old, and they're described as days old scratches. Someone made the comment that Barry may have wanted to delay going from the hotel to Salida so that if he had scratches then already, that he didn't want them to be seen, and maybe he was worried someone would ask him to take off his shirt. That is what they asked Chris Watts to do, right? Let's just see, it says here, Barry Morphew interview May 21st, so 8 days later, just after, just more than a week later, they interviewed him again. Let's see, it's 2 pages long. Hey. Okay, I think I'm going to, Timmy, he's seeing a gardener going by outside the window. Okay, so I think I'm going to call it a day, a night for you guys. It's about 8:20 in the morning here. Timmy needs his walk. But I did want to get into the 20s of the pages. And I must say this section is really interesting, dealing with all the statements Barry made. I'm sure you'll agree with that this is really where it gets interesting, where Barry talks about the events and the authorities give their footnotes saying what they know and what seems reasonable or not, right? Okay, so that's my story. Heather says, wasn't there a suspect rose bush or tree planted? Sunflower says, if Barry is suggesting the cleaning lady, then there should be evidence in the house. Good point. Jean says, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys. I just want to thank those who contributed super chats. I want to thank all the members who are here. I really want to thank Jean for being the mod that has stuck it out to the end. I think you joined us a little bit late. Also to Stephanie, who left us a bit early, but who was here for quite a long time. I hope Stephanie's asleep so far. Carol says, what time did the Ritters check on Suzanne? I think it was around about 5. I know that's when they called, so probably 4 o'clock, somewhere around there. I don't know whether Barry's daughters called home and then I'm not quite sure how Jean found out. Not 100% sure on that. Cessna says, interested to know your views on the Bobcat. That does come up. I don't think the Bobcat is irrelevant. That does come up in terms of the cadaver dogs, which is definitely quite interesting. So yeah, thanks to all the subscribers in chat. I really didn't think there would be that many, this late, but it'll definitely, maybe I'll do a subscribers only chat every second or third episode. It's just hard to get through all of this with hundreds of people chatting and responding to all of you. So consider, if you've enjoyed chatting, consider becoming a member. Then there's only like 50 people in chat, and I can deal with you guys, each person like more. And it's also a nice way of thanking me or showing your appreciation for these 3-hour sessions, right? Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up by wrapping up my story about that cycle that I did. So I sort of saying that I'd gotten there. I couldn't actually use my bike because the wheel had jammed, and was very disappointed. I was kind of anticipating this hard climb with these other riders. And anyway, long story short, I rushed home. I swapped my wheels around. This is all at pretty much sunrise. And then I rushed back with my other bicycle, so the wheels on a different frame. Parked, got on my bike, climbed up to where we needed to go to still up quite a difficult climb. Thanks a lot, Terry Dean. And then proceeded to ride the route that I knew they were on. But I was a little bit late. I knew where they were likely to be, but I was a little bit behind them. And I was quite blue. I was like, here I am riding on my own. I can't catch up to them. I'm slow. I'd really been looking forward to this particular moment and training session. And I was just getting quite down, just like, not very happy. And then just sort of out of nowhere, approaching a really, really tough climb. It's really a very, very hard section. As I got to the bottom of it, there was this whole group of riders huddled by the side of the road. And what had happened was one of them had gotten a puncture, and they were sort of fixing it. And so what happened was I was now rejoining this group that I'd wanted to ride with to begin with, and they had some bad luck, but their bad fortune was my good fortune in a sense. So I'd now, because of the flat tire, I was able to reach them and join them and even have a little bit of a rest. And they were now going to go up this big climb when they were ready. And then I said, well, I'm going to go. I rested a bit with them, chatted a bit with them, but the tire took a while to fix. So one of the people who was a weaker climber said, I'm going to go up ahead. And then I went with that weaker climber. And that was just such a nice, it was actually the only lady in the group. I actually climbed ahead of her. And the fact that she was behind me meant that she really pushed me. So I really climbed that long, difficult section really strongly, really well. And I ended up riding more than twice the usual distance I would normally ride. I really rode strongly in the end. There were more punctures, and so it was like more their bad fortune was my good fortune. I almost felt like I jinxed their ride because, I mean, I got there, my wheel had problems, then one of their people had a puncture, then another one. And anyway, each time they got a puncture, it allowed me a time to rest. And then ultimately, it was a fantastic ride for me. I felt strong. Everything was all systems go once I got back there. And they all seemed to be having a little bit of difficulty with mechanicals and to whatever. But it's quite interesting how you can be your own worst enemy when something goes wrong. Like for me, it was also like you want this fairy tale experience, and then things don't work out so well. it doesn't have to be a nightmare or a fairy tale. You can kind of, it can kind of be what it is. And it ended up being a really good ride despite the difficulties. And so that was kind of why it was this epic. It was really hard riding, but also, things going wrong. But that things going wrong helped things go right for me. That makes sense. Madeline says, good night. Cessna, I'm kind of early into my training, but I did about 50 kilometers, but with quite a lot of climbing, so it was quite tough. But these guys are like training for the Ironman, so some of them went on to do about 3 times the distance, like 130 kilometers. I didn't do all of that with them. I just did a section with them, but I'm trying to build up that I can do more and more with them. So it was important to do more of that session with them, if that makes sense. I also think it's quite important, the bicycle narrative. So in other words, I ride, I'm a cyclist, I also ride mountain bike. It's important to know a little bit about that and to put that into the Morphew case. And what I mean is simple things like, would you use a water bottle? When do you normally ride? How long do you normally ride? What do you wear? Who do you ride with? Just what is your routine? Those are all factors that play into the believability of this story. I think, like with the John Benet Ramsey case, if you for a moment start to think that the ransom note is real or that there's an intruder, well, then you're going to go down a particular route and you're going to probably get lost. Of course, if you do the opposite and you say the ransom note's definitely bogus, it's staged, it's false. Timmy is fighting with a cat because he can't go for a walk. Timmy, what's my comb doing there? Eh? Okay. So, yeah, I'm about to finish up here with my long story. That is going to kind of give you an idea of how credible it is. So in terms of the John Benet Ramsey case, you should have the kind of common sense to say, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, walk perk. So in terms of the Barry Morphew case, can you exclude the fact that Suzanne went for a mountain bike ride? If you can, you are immediately going to go into a different direction. Things like staging, things like things aren't always what they seem. And if things aren't always what they seem, it means someone isn't what he seems. And that's definitely, I think, a, what do you call it? It's a theme to this particular story. Okay, so that is my story. I think we'll wrap it up at 3 hours 30. We are 3:28. Just thank you to the 147 of you who are still in chat. Let's get the thumbs up to 147 at least. We had 140. Yvonne says intertextualities are valuable gems in true crime. Yvonne, you know it. You know it. P. Willie says, thanks, Nick, for getting me up, for getting me to get my Maisie road bike off its hook. I grew up working in a bicycle shop and riding, can relate. Awesome. Okay, so that is it. Thanks a lot, guys. Jean, thank you so much to you for cracking me up. Thank you so much for holding the fort. I was actually thinking if I don't have any mods, I'm going to have to call it a day, call it a night, but you've definitely helped us get a little bit further along the narrative. Would you guys like me to continue with this? We're on episode 4. There could easily be another 15 episodes. So thanks a lot, Jean. Carol says, I know BM is getting old looking since May 10. Do you guys think he's aged? Okay. So the trial, the Morphew trial, looks like it's going to be happening in about 2 months. So there are going to be motions between now and then. There's a motion for dismissal happening right now. We will see what happens with that. But we've also got a long way to go to familiarizing ourselves properly with the full affidavit, and we'll see where we are, you know, just before the trial happens. Hopefully, we'll all have a kind of expertise, and if we hear the prosecutor saying something or forgetting something, we can say, "Hey, don't forget that," right? Okay, thanks, guys. We had 3 hours study. I'm going to nip it here and take Timmy for a walk. See you guys soon. I'll let you guys know when. We'll maybe do this twice a week or so. Until next time, have a good sleep, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao. Timmy, I'm taking you now.